Hello friend, this is our Tell, and here we create the amazing fan fiction stories where small changes can rewrite the whole story. You already know that. If you enjoy this kind of story, so must subscribe the channel for new upcoming videos.
Hey there, story lovers. This is Hogwarts Tales, and we're bringing you an epic adventure. What if Voldemort's killing curse gave Harry every memory of Tom Riddle and he knew all his Horcrux locations at age 1? Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin this journey. Chapter 1. The boy who remembered the cupboard under the stairs smelled like dust and old shoes, and the boy inside it was dreaming of murder. Not his own. Never his own. In this particular dream, he stood in a cottage on a hill, tall, thin-fingered, wearing a face that was still handsome, still human, and he watched the light leave an old man's eyes. The old man crumpled onto an expensive rug. A woman screamed from somewhere deeper in the house. A snake coiled near the doorway, tasting the air with lazy satisfaction. Harry Potter woke up. He was 7 years old. He lay very still on his thin mattress, breathing slowly, waiting for the images to settle. They always did, eventually. The trick was not to fight them, not to push back, that only made them louder, more vivid, like pressing your face against glass to see something horrible on the other side. Instead, you let them wash through, acknowledged them, and filed them away. Tom Riddle had murdered his father and grandparents in that cottage. Little Hangleton. Summer of 1943. He'd used Morphin Gaunt's wand and then modified the old man's memory so the ministry would blame Morphin. 16 years old, and already so clever it made Harry's stomach turn. Harry knew this the way he knew his own name. The way he knew Aunt Petunia would knock on the cupboard door in exactly 12 minutes, barking at him to get up and start the bacon. The way he knew the loose board on the third stair creaked if you stepped on the left side. Some things you just knew. Other things you remembered in the dark, in fragments that tasted like someone else's life. He sat up carefully, the ceiling was low, and he'd learned that lesson with a goose egg on his forehead at age 4, and pulled his knees to his chest. Through the thin door, he could hear the central heating click on. Uncle Vernon's alarm would go off in 8 minutes. Then the heavy footsteps, the bathroom door, the ritual of morning. Harry reached under his mattress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a list, written in handwriting far too neat for a 7-year-old, in a code of his own invention. Not that anyone in this house would care enough to search his things. That was the great advantage of being invisible. The list had 6 items on it. He'd rewritten it 4 times now as the memories became clearer, as the fog of infancy receded and Tom Riddle's life crystallized in his mind like ice forming on a window. 6 pieces of a madman's soul, scattered across Britain. Harry folded the list and tucked it back under the mattress. Then he put on his glasses, Dudley's old pair, held together with tape, and got ready to cook breakfast for people who hated him. The bacon popped and spat. Harry kept his hand steady, turning each strip at exactly the right moment. Aunt Petunia stood behind him, watching with that pinched expression that meant she was looking for something to criticize but couldn't quite find it. This was one of the earliest things he'd changed. At 4, Harry had been a clumsy cook, all children were. But he carried inside him the memories of a boy who'd grown up in Wool's orphanage during the 1930s, where you learned to be useful or you went hungry. Tom Riddle had never cooked bacon specifically, but he'd understood the principle, make yourself indispensable, and they leave you alone. So Harry cooked well. He cleaned well. He was quiet and quick and polite. Not too polite, that would have made Vernon suspicious. Just enough that Petunia could tell herself the boy was learning his place, and Vernon could ignore him as easily as he ignored the furniture. It had taken Harry roughly 2 years of conscious effort to establish this equilibrium. Before that, before the memories had organized themselves into something he could use, there had been bad times. Screaming nightmares at age 2 that made Petunia dump cold water on him through the cupboard vents. Fits of accidental magic at 3 that Vernon responded to with locked doors and skipped meals. A period at age 4 when Harry had spoken in Parseltongue in his sleep and Petunia had gone so white she'd looked like a ghost herself. But by 5, Harry had control. Not perfect control, he was still a child, and some nights the memories were bad enough that he woke up shaking, unable to remember if he was Harry Potter or Tom Riddle or some awful fusion of both. But during the day, in the light, he knew who he was. He was the boy who was going to fix everything. "Don't burn it," Petunia said sharply, even though the bacon was perfect. "Yes, Aunt Petunia." She went to get Dudley up. Harry plated the bacon, started the eggs, and thought about Horcruxes. The diary was with Lucius Malfoy. That one was easy, relatively speaking. Tom had given it to Malfoy for safekeeping before his downfall, and Malfoy had it locked away in his manor. Getting to it would require access to the Malfoy family, which meant entering the wizarding world, which meant waiting for Hogwarts. The locket was in a cave by the sea. That one was dangerous. Inferi in the water, poison in the basin, and dark magic layered so thick that even Riddle's own memories carried a faint whiff of pride about it. Harry would need help for the cave. He wasn't foolish enough to think otherwise. The ring was in the ruins of the Gaunt Shack, protected by a curse that would kill anyone who put it on. The curse was tied to the Resurrection Stone, one of the Deathly Hallows, though Riddle hadn't known that. He'd seen the Peveril crest and thought it was his ancestor's mark. Typical. The diadem was in Hogwarts, hidden in the Room of Requirement. That one was almost laughably accessible once you knew where to look. A room that gave you whatever you needed, and inside it, centuries of forgotten junk, and among the junk, Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem. Harry had decided that would be his first target. The cup was in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. That one made Harry's head hurt when he thought about it. Gringotts' security was legendary. He'd need allies, leverage, or a very good plan. Probably all three. And then there was Harry himself. That was the part of the list he'd written last. The part he'd stared at the longest, in the dark of his cupboard, while the Dursleys slept above him, not knowing that a piece of the most dangerous dark wizard in a century was lodged in the skull of the child they kept under their stairs. Harry cracked an egg into the pan and watched it sizzle. He didn't think about the last item much. Not yet. He was 7. He had time. The years between 7 and 11 passed in a strange, dual rhythm. On the surface, Harry was the Dursley household's quiet shadow. He went to school, did well enough to avoid attention but not so well that Dudley looked bad by comparison. That particular trick came straight from Tom Riddle's playbook, and Harry hated that he used it so naturally. He had no friends. This was partly the Dursleys' doing, Dudley's gang made sure of that, and partly Harry's own choice. Friendships meant questions. Questions meant lies. And Harry had enough lies to manage already. Beneath the surface, Harry was doing something no child his age had any business doing. He was studying. Not school. Not even magic, exactly. He had no wand, and the accidental magic he produced was unreliable, emotional, impossible to aim. What he studied was Tom Riddle's life. It was strange, having someone else's memories. They weren't like his own. Harry's memories were warm, sensory, rooted in the small realities of number 4 Privet Drive, the scratchy carpet of the cupboard, the smell of Petunia's cleaning products, the way the light came through the kitchen window in the afternoon. Riddle's memories were colder, sharper, more intellectual. Tom Riddle had experienced the world like a chess player experiences a board, always calculating, always 3 moves ahead, always noting who could be useful and who was in the way. And there was a frightening amount of overlap. Harry noticed it first at age 8, when a boy in his class knocked his books off his desk, and Harry's first instinct, before the anger, before the hurt, was to calculate. Kyle Morris. Father works at the auto shop. Mother runs the school bake sale. Insecure. Bullies to impress Dudley. Vulnerable if isolated from the group. He'd caught himself, horrified. That wasn't him thinking. That was Riddle thinking. Or was it? After 7 years of carrying these memories, where was the line? Harry spent a week not sleeping well after that. Then he made a decision that became the bedrock of everything that followed. He would use Riddle's knowledge, Riddle's cunning, even Riddle's understanding of people. But he would choose, actively choose, every time, what to do with it. Tom Riddle had seen Kyle Morris and thought leverage. Harry saw Kyle Morris and thought leave him alone. The choice mattered. Harry clung to that. By age 9, he'd mapped out Riddle's entire magical education in his head. He knew spells he'd never cast, potions he'd never brewed, dark magic that made his scar prickle just thinking about it. He understood the theory of transfiguration at a NEWT level. He could recite the properties of dragon's blood. He knew the precise wand movement for the killing curse, and the way it felt to cast it, the cold rush of it, the satisfaction, and that memory, more than any other, made him want to scrub the inside of his own skull. He didn't want to know what murder felt like. But he did. At 10, Harry started planning in earnest. He had a notebook, hidden under a floorboard in his cupboard, wrapped in a plastic bag against damp, filled with timelines, contingencies, and risk assessments. The handwriting was small and precise. The content would have terrified any adult who read it. Diadem, Hogwarts, Room of Requirement, 7th floor. Access, first week of term. Destruction, Fiend Fire, too dangerous without control, Basilisk Venom, accessible. Chamber of Secrets, Parseltongue required, I have it. Alternative, Gryffindor's Sword, if it presents itself. Diary, Malfoy Manor. Must intercept before deployment. Malfoy will likely attempt to weaponize it. Monitor Malfoy's behavior toward Hogwarts students. High probability he'll target a Weasley, multiple children, blood traitor family, useful cover. Locket, Sea Cave, unknown coastal location. Regulus Black retrieved it, died in the attempt. Need to locate the real locket. Creature. House Elf at 12, Grimmauld Place. Must gain access to Black family home. He wrote these things with a steady hand, and then he lay in his cupboard and stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of it pressing down on him like earth on a coffin. He was 10 years old, and he was planning a war. Some nights, the memories came unbidden and unwanted. On one particular night in early July, Harry was 10, almost 11, and the summer heat made the cupboard stifling. He dreamed of the orphanage. Not a murder dream. Those were bad, but he built walls around them, learned to observe them like films playing on a distant screen. This was worse. This was a memory of Tom Riddle at age 9, sitting on a bed in Wool's orphanage, and wanting. Not wanting anything specific. Just wanting. Wanting someone to come. Wanting to matter. Wanting the hollow space inside him to fill up with something that wasn't anger. Harry woke with tears on his face and spent the rest of the night sitting with his arms around his knees, shivering despite the heat. That was the night he understood something important about Tom Riddle, something Riddle himself had never understood. The monster hadn't been born a monster. He'd been made. Not by any single act of cruelty, but by the slow, grinding absence of love, year after year, until the emptiness calcified into something cold and sharp and permanent. Harry lived in a cupboard. Harry's relatives called him a freak. Harry had never once heard the words, "I love you," directed at him. And yet. He thought of his mother. He didn't remember her, not really, not his own memory. But he remembered Riddle's memory of the night in Godric's Hollow. He'd seen it from the other side, Lily Potter, standing in front of the crib, arms spread, begging. Not Harry, please, not Harry. And the green light, and her falling, and then the wand turning toward the baby, and then, pain. Blinding, soul-rending pain. And then darkness. And then nothing, from Riddle's perspective. But from Harry's perspective, everything. Every scrap of Tom Marvolo Riddle, poured into a 15-month-old boy like water into a cup far too small to hold it. His mother had died for him. That was real. That wasn't a calculation or a strategy or a chess move. Lily Potter had looked at death and chosen her son, and no amount of Riddle's cold logic could make that meaningless. Harry held on to that the way a drowning man holds on to driftwood. The letter came on a Tuesday. Harry had known it would come, had known the exact time frame, in fact, because Tom Riddle had once obsessively catalogued the administrative procedures of Hogwarts during his time as head boy. Letters went out in the final week of July, delivered by owl, addressed in green ink on yellowish parchment. What Harry had not anticipated was that Uncle Vernon would react quite so violently to the sight of it. "What's this rubbish?" Vernon snatched the envelope from the mail pile, his face cycling through colors, pink, red, purple, as he read the address. Mr. H. Potter, The Cupboard Under the Stairs, 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Harry, standing in the hallway, watched Vernon's eyes bulge. The man's gaze snapped to Harry, then to Petunia, then back to the letter. "Petunia," Vernon said, in a voice that was trying very hard to be calm. "It's one of those letters." Petunia went rigid. She was at the kitchen table, a cup of tea halfway to her lips. She set it down with a clink. "Throw it away." "Shouldn't I, throw it away?" Vernon ripped the letter in half, then in quarters, then stuffed the pieces into the bin. He turned to Harry with a look that was meant to be intimidating but mostly looked constipated. "There's no letter. You didn't see anything. Go to your cupboard." Harry went to his cupboard. He sat on his mattress and smiled, very slightly, in the dark. He didn't need the letter. He'd known its contents before it was written. What mattered was that the clock was now ticking. 3 days later, he put his plan into motion. It was a Wednesday morning. Vernon had left for work. Petunia was at her weekly hair appointment. Dudley was at a friend's house, which meant he was probably terrorizing the neighborhood. The house was empty. Harry moved quickly. He dressed in Dudley's least ridiculous hand-me-downs, a faded t-shirt that hung to his knees and jeans cinched with a belt that wrapped nearly twice around his waist. He looked absurd, but that couldn't be helped. He retrieved his notebook from under the floorboard, tucked it into a backpack he'd taken from the school's lost and found weeks ago, and left number 4 through the back door. He walked to the end of Privet Drive, turned left on Wisteria Walk, and kept walking until he reached the small park where Dudley's gang usually loitered. It was empty. He sat on a swing and waited. At precisely 11:14 in the morning, the night bus appeared. Harry had flagged it down with his wand hand, his right hand, stuck out over the curb, just as Riddle's memories told him the protocol worked. He didn't have a wand, but the bus responded to magical intent, and Harry had plenty of that. The purple triple-decker screeched to a halt in front of him, materializing from nothing with a bang that startled a cat off a nearby wall. "Welcome to the night bus, emergency transport for the stranded witch or wizard," said a bored voice from inside. A pimply young conductor, early 20s, thin, slightly unsteady on his feet, peered down at Harry. "My name is Stan Shunpike, and I will be your conductor this." He stopped. Squinted. "Blimey. How old are you?" 12, Harry said, without hesitation. "I'm small for my age." Stan looked skeptical but not enough to argue. "Right. Where to?" "London. The Leaky Cauldron. That's 11 sickles." Stan held out a hand. "Or if you want OT chocolate, I'll pay when we arrive. I've got gold at Gringotts but no coins on me." Harry kept his voice steady, confident. This was a gamble, but a calculated one. The night bus served the wizarding community. A kid asking for the Leaky Cauldron clearly belonged to that world. Stan wavered. Then he shrugged. "Get on, then. But you're paying the moment we land, yeah?" Harry climbed aboard. The ride was violent. The bus careened through the English countryside, squeezing between buildings that jumped out of the way, leaping from county to county in stomach-lurching bursts. Harry gripped the edge of a brass bed frame, the bus's version of seating, and kept his eyes fixed forward, breathing through his nose. Riddle had never ridden the night bus. This was entirely new, and Harry's body, the actual, physical, 10-year-old body he inhabited, did not enjoy it one bit. They arrived in London in 14 minutes. Stan opened the doors, and Harry stepped out onto a grubby side street he didn't recognize. But there, wedged between a bookshop and a record store, was a small, dark pub that most people walking past seemed unable to see. The Leaky Cauldron. Harry walked in, and the wizarding world swallowed him whole. The pub was dim and smoky and alive in a way that Privet Drive would never be. Witches and wizards sat at rough wooden tables, drinking things that bubbled and steamed. A hunchbacked old woman was nursing a glass of something green in the corner. The barman, Tom, Harry's mind supplied instantly, old Tom, this was the man who'd served Riddle's mother a drink once, decades ago, though he wouldn't remember, looked up as Harry entered and raised an eyebrow. "Bit young to be on your own, aren't you?" "Meeting my aunt," Harry said smoothly. "She's in Diagon Alley already." "Running late." Tom nodded. He'd seen 1,000 kids pass through here at the start of every school year. One more barely registered. Harry moved through the pub toward the back courtyard. He knew the way. Riddle had walked this path countless times as a Hogwarts student, and pushed open the back door to find himself facing a brick wall. 3 up. 2 across. He didn't have a wand to tap the bricks. But he had something Riddle's memories had taught him. Determination could substitute for a wand in minor magical interactions, especially at magical sites already designed to respond to intent. Harry pressed his palm flat against the 3rd brick up and the 2nd across. He pushed magic, raw, unfocused, willful magic, into the wall, and thought, open. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the brick quivered. Then it began to shift, folding back, and the wall rearranged itself into an archway, and beyond it lay Diagon Alley. Harry stepped through and took his first breath of the world he'd been dreaming about for 9 years. It was overwhelming. Not the sights, he'd seen it all through Riddle's eyes, but the feeling. The crackle of ambient magic in the air. The sheer density of it, like walking from a quiet room into a thunderstorm. Harry's scar gave a single, sharp pulse, and then settled. His skin prickled. Every instinct in his body, both the ones he'd been born with and the ones he'd inherited, told him the same thing. Home. He pushed the feeling down. He was here on business. Gringotts first. The white marble building dominated the far end of the alley, crooked and grand, with goblins flanking the entrance in burnished armor. Harry walked with purpose, not quickly, not slowly, head up, shoulders back. Riddle had understood something fundamental about navigating the world. If you moved like you belonged somewhere, people assumed you did. The goblins at the door glanced at him and saw a scruffy boy in oversized clothes. Harry didn't flinch. He walked up to the nearest teller, a sharp-nosed goblin perched on a high stool, and spoke clearly. "Good morning. My name is Harry Potter. I'd like to access my vault." The goblin looked down at him. His expression didn't change. Goblin expressions rarely did, in Harry's inherited experience, but something shifted behind his dark eyes. "Key?" the goblin said. "I don't have it. I believe it's held in trust by my magical guardian." Harry paused. He'd rehearsed this part. "I wasn't informed about my vault until recently. I'd like to verify my identity through blood confirmation and receive a replacement key, if that's possible." The goblin stared at him for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a throat condition. "Wait here." 10 minutes later, Harry was sitting in a small office deep inside Gringotts, across a desk from a goblin named Griphook. A silver knife and a piece of enchanted parchment sat between them. "A drop of blood on the parchment," Griphook said. "It will confirm your identity and vault access." Harry pricked his finger without hesitation. The blood hit the parchment and spread in thin lines, forming words, Harry James Potter. Vault 687. Trust Vault, established by James and Lily Potter. Key holder, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Harry read the name and kept his face perfectly neutral. Dumbledore held his key. Of course he did. The old man had positioned himself as the gatekeeper to every aspect of Harry's life, his placement with the Dursleys, his vault access, presumably his mail. A benevolent prison warden was still a warden. "I'd like a new key issued," Harry said. "And I'd like the previous key holder's access revoked." Griphook's eyebrows, such as they were, rose a fraction. "You are underage. Typically, this requires, Gringotts operates under Goblin law, not Ministry of Magic regulations," Harry said. He was careful to keep his tone respectful. Goblins responded poorly to human arrogance, but they responded very well to humans who understood the distinction between Goblin sovereignty and wizard bureaucracy. Under Goblin law, blood-confirmed vault holders have full access regardless of age. The Gringotts Charter of 1743 is quite clear on this point. Griphook stared at him. The silence stretched. Then the goblin smiled, a thin, razor thing, but genuine. "You've done your research, Mr. Potter." "I try." Griphook produced a new key, small, gold, warm to the touch, and slid it across the desk. "Your previous key holder will be notified of the change, per standard procedure." Harry took the key. Dumbledore would know he'd been here. That was unavoidable, and honestly, it didn't matter much. The old man would find out about Harry one way or another. Better to control the narrative than be caught off guard. "One more thing," Harry said. "I'd like to review any properties or assets held in the Potter name." This took longer. Another goblin was brought in, older and more senior, and a ledger was produced. Harry learned that beyond the trust vault, which held a small fortune in galleons, more money than the Dursleys would earn in a decade, there was a family vault, sealed until Harry's 17th birthday, and a property, a cottage in Godric's Hollow, currently in ruins and warded against entry. He also learned that there was a standing instruction, filed by Albus Dumbledore, that Harry Potter was not to be contacted by Gringotts directly until his 11th birthday and the receipt of his Hogwarts letter. Harry filed this information away. He thanked the goblins, sincerely, which seemed to surprise them, and rode the rattling mine cart down to Vault 687. The vault door swung open, and Harry stood in front of more gold than he'd ever seen. Piles of galleons, columns of sickles, heaps of nuts. Enough to fund his mission 10 times over. He filled a pouch, a self-refilling moleskin pouch he'd asked Griphook about and purchased for 3 galleons, a trick he'd learned from Riddle's memories of rare magical objects, and rode back up to the surface. Diagon Alley was busier now. Late-morning shoppers, witches with baskets, a cluster of teenagers laughing outside Fortescue's ice cream parlor. Harry moved through the crowd, invisible in his ordinariness. His first stop was Ollivander's. The wand shop was narrow and dusty, crammed floor to ceiling with thin boxes. A bell chimed as Harry entered, and then there was silence, and then a voice from somewhere in the stacks. "I was wondering when I'd see you, Mr. Potter." Garrick Ollivander materialized from behind a shelf, pale-eyed and unsettling. Harry met his gaze without blinking. Through Riddle's memories, he knew this man, knew that Ollivander had sold Tom Riddle a wand with a phoenix feather core in 1938, and that the wandmaker had recognized, even then, that something extraordinary had walked into his shop. "You know who I am?" Harry said. "My dear boy, everyone in our world knows who you are." Ollivander's silver eyes flickered to Harry's forehead, to the scar hidden beneath his fringe. "But I know something else, too. I know the wand that gave you that scar. You. 13.5 inches. Phoenix feather core. I sold that wand, and I remember every wand I've ever sold." Harry said nothing. Ollivander studied him for another moment, then clapped his hands softly. "Let's find your match." The process took 40 minutes. Holly. Maple. Ebony. Beech. Wand after wand was placed in Harry's hand, and wand after wand was snatched back. Harry could feel each one's personality, another gift of Riddle's knowledge. Most children experienced wand selection as random sparks and misfires, but Harry understood the magical resonance at play, the way a wand's core reached out to the wizard's magical signature. Finally, Ollivander placed a box on the counter with something like reverence. Holly. 11 inches. Phoenix feather core. He paused. The phoenix whose tail feather resides in this wand gave one other feather. Just one. Harry picked up the wand. Heat flooded up his arm. Gold and red sparks erupted from the tip, cascading around him like fireworks. The wand sang in his grip, that was the only word for it, and Harry felt, for the first time in his life, like a missing limb had been returned to him. Curious, Ollivander murmured. Very curious. The brother wand, Harry said quietly. Ollivander's eyes widened. You know. I know a lot of things, Mr. Ollivander. Harry set 7 galleons on the counter. Thank you. He left the shop before Ollivander could ask any more questions, the holly wand tucked into his waistband beneath the oversized t-shirt. His heart was hammering. Not from fear, from the sheer, electric reality of holding a wand for the first time. He had a wand. He had gold. He had 10 years of the most gifted dark wizard's accumulated knowledge sitting in his head. The game was on. Harry spent the rest of the afternoon shopping with efficient precision. Robes from Madame Malkin's, Hogwarts, dear. Not yet, ma'am. My family's taking me early for the fitting. A trunk from the luggage shop, standard size, with a built-in expansion charm. Books, not just the first-year list, but advanced texts on curse-breaking, occlumency, and protective enchantments. A potions kit. Parchment and ink. An owl, a beautiful snowy owl that landed on his arm in the Owl Emporium and refused to move, which settled that. He also bought, from a dusty second-hand shop on a side alley near Nocturne Turn, a book on fiendfire. The shopkeeper, a wheezy old wizard with more beard than face, gave him a long look as he rang it up. Bit advanced for you, innit? It's for my dad, Harry said. He's a curse-breaker. Him. The old man wrapped the book in brown paper. 7 sickles. And tell your dad to be careful. Fiendfires killed more casters than targets. I will. Harry walked back through Diagon Alley with his purchases shrunk and packed into his trunk, which he'd shrunk and placed in his pocket, a tricky bit of magic that he performed in a quiet alley, using Riddle's knowledge and his new wand with a focus that left him slightly breathless. Underage magic outside school was monitored by the Trace, he knew. But the Trace detected magic in the vicinity of underage wizards. It couldn't distinguish between the child's magic and ambient magic in a place like Diagon Alley, where hundreds of adult witches and wizards cast spells every minute. It was a deliberate loophole in the system, one that pureblood families had exploited for centuries to give their children a head start. Tom Riddle hadn't known that until his 3rd year. Harry knew it at 10. He rode the night bus back to Little Whinging, paying Stan his 11 sickles this time, plus a generous tip that made the young man's eyebrows disappear under his cap, and walked back to Privet Drive in the late afternoon sun. The house was still empty. He let himself in, unshrunk his trunk in the cupboard, stowed his wand, and had dinner on the table by the time Petunia came through the door. What are you looking so pleased about? She snapped, eyeing him suspiciously. Nothing, Aunt Petunia. The pork chops are ready. She stared at him for a moment, then went to set the table. That night, in the cupboard, Harry lit his wand, Lumos, his first spell, cast with barely a whisper, and studied the Fiendfire book until 2 in the morning. He needed a reliable method for destroying Horcruxes, and Fiendfire was the most accessible. Basilisk venom was more effective, but it required getting into the Chamber of Secrets and extracting a fong from a 60-foot serpent. Possible, but not a first week of school activity. The holly wand glowed steadily in his hand, patient and warm. Harry turned a page and learned about containment circles. More letters arrived over the following days. Vernon grew increasingly unhinged, boarding up the mail slot, nailing the door shut, moving the family to a series of increasingly absurd locations in a futile attempt to outrun the owls. Harry watched the performance with the detached amusement of someone who knew exactly how the story ended. He let it play out. Not because he needed Hagrid, he'd already done his shopping, already had his wand, already knew more about the wizarding world than most adult wizards. But because Hagrid would be his first contact with Dumbledore's network, and Harry wanted to see how the old man played his opening move. Besides, Harry had read Riddle's memory of Hagrid's expulsion, the framing for the Chamber of Secrets, the half-giant's wand snapped for a crime he didn't commit, and felt a cold fury about it that had nothing to do with Riddle's perspective and everything to do with his own. Hagrid was a good man who'd been broken by the system. Harry wanted to meet him. The hut on the rock was everything Harry had expected, miserable, damp, cold, and perched in the middle of the sea on a chunk of stone that Vernon had somehow convinced himself would be owl-proof. The Dursleys huddled in the front room. Dudley lay on the sofa. Vernon and Petunia shared the bedroom. Harry lay on the floor with a thin blanket, watching Dudley's digital watch tick toward midnight. 11:57, 11:58. 11:59, July 31st. His 11th birthday. Midnight. Boom. The door shook on its hinges. Dudley jerked awake with a squeal. Vernon came stumbling out of the bedroom, Petunia behind him, and Harry sat up slowly, pulling his blanket around his shoulders. Boom. 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 The door gave way. Hagrid filled the doorway. There was no other word for it, he was enormous, a wall of wild black hair and leather and sheer physical presence. Rain poured behind him. His beetle-black eyes swept the room and landed on Harry with an expression of such naked emotion, joy, relief, grief, all tangled together, that Harry felt something twist in his chest. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," Hagrid said. His voice was rough and warm. "Yeah, look a lot like your dad, but you've got my mother's eyes," Harry said. "I know." Hagrid blinked. Then a wide smile spread across his face. "Someone told ya, then?" "Something like that." "I demand that you leave at once." Vernon blustered from the bedroom doorway, brandishing an ancient rifle that Harry was fairly certain didn't work. "You are breaking and entering." Hagrid crossed the room in 2 steps, grabbed the barrel of the rifle, and bent it upward like a pipe cleaner. "Dry up, Dursley, yeah, great prune." He tossed the ruined gun aside, then turned back to Harry, and his expression softened. He reached inside his enormous overcoat. "Almost forgot. I got something for ya. Might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste fine just the same." He produced a slightly squashed box. Inside was a chocolate cake with green icing. "Happy birthday, Harry." No one had ever made Harry a birthday cake before. His vision blurred. Just for a second. He blinked it away and said, "Thank you, Hagrid." Nothin'. Hagrid sat down heavily on the sofa, which groaned but held. "Now, I suppose you're wonderin' why I'm here. You've come to take me to Hogwarts." Hagrid beamed. "Dumbledore sent me himself. Said ya might not be gotten your letter, something about your relatives not bein' the most cooperative." He shot a look at the Dursleys that could have curdled milk. "He's not going." Vernon had found his courage again, or at least a reasonable facsimile. "We swore when we took him and we'd stamp out that nonsense, you knew." Harry said, and even though he'd known the answer for years, had known since Riddle's memories first organized themselves in his 5-year-old brain, he let his voice carry the shock, the betrayal, that an ordinary boy would feel. "You knew I was a wizard, and you never told me." Petunia flinched. It was small, quick, almost invisible, but Harry caught it. He'd spent years studying every micro-expression in this house. "Knew," she said. "Of course we knew. How could you not be? My perfect sister, getting her letter, going off to that freak school, and coming back every holiday turning teacups into rats. My parents were so proud, a witch in the family. But I saw her for what she was, a freak. Petunia was shaking. Decades of resentment poured out of her like water from a cracked dam, and Harry, carrying Riddle's preternatural understanding of human pain, saw the real emotion underneath the anger, grief. Petunia had wanted the magic. She'd wanted the letter. She'd written to Dumbledore and begged to attend Hogwarts, and he'd turned her down with a kind letter that had cut her more deeply than cruelty ever could. Harry knew this because Riddle's memories contained Snape's memories, overheard in a conversation with Dumbledore that Tom had spied on during his time at Hogwarts. The layers of knowledge in his head were dizzying sometimes. He looked at his aunt and felt a wave of pity that she would never accept. "Come on, Harry," Hagrid said, standing. "We've got a lot to do tomorrow." "Lots of things to buy, actually," Harry said. "I've already got my supplies." Hagrid froze mid-stand. "Yeah, what?" "I went to Diagon Alley last week. Got my wand, my books, everything. I've got my vault key too." Harry pulled the gold key from his pocket and held it up. "I hope that's all right." The silence that followed was profound. Hagrid stared at Harry. The Dursleys stared at Harry. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. "How?" Hagrid started. "I knew about the wizarding world already," Harry said carefully. He'd rehearsed this explanation. "Not the full truth, never the full truth, not yet, but enough to satisfy without alarming. I've known for a long time. I don't know exactly how. Maybe it's something to do with the curse that hit me. But I know things. About Hogwarts. About Voldemort." Hagrid flinched at the name. Harry noticed, filed it away, and continued. "I know he killed my parents. I know Dumbledore placed me here for protection. And I know that Hogwarts is where I need to be." He met Hagrid's eyes. "I'm ready." Hagrid sat back down. The sofa protested again. He was looking at Harry with an expression Harry couldn't quite read, something between awe and worry. "Dumbledore's gonna want to hear about this," Hagrid said slowly. "I'm sure he will," Harry agreed. "I'd be happy to talk to him. At school." Another silence. Then Hagrid shook his head and laughed, a big, booming, slightly bewildered laugh. "Blimey, Harry. You're not what I expected." "No," Harry said, and meant it more than Hagrid could know. "I don't suppose I am." They left the hut at dawn. Hagrid had a motorcycle, Sirius Black's motorcycle, though Hagrid didn't say so, and Harry didn't mention it, and they flew over the sea toward the mainland with the wind screaming past and Harry's hands gripping Hagrid's coat. Harry could have taken the night bus. Could have made his own way to King's Cross on September 1st without any help at all. But sitting on the back of this motorcycle, watching the sun rise over the English Channel, he felt something that Riddle's memories had no framework for. He felt like a kid. Just for a moment. A kid on a flying motorcycle, heading toward a castle, about to start an adventure. He held on to that feeling as long as he could. Back on solid ground, Hagrid insisted on escorting Harry through London, despite Harry's assurances that he could manage. They ended up at a small cafe near King's Cross, where Hagrid ordered approximately 6 plates of sausages and told Harry stories about his parents. Harry listened to every word. He knew most of it already, fragments from Riddle's perspective, filtered through dark and hostile eyes. But hearing it from Hagrid was different. Through Hagrid's eyes, James and Lily were warm, real, human. Not targets. Not obstacles. People. "Your mother was something special," Hagrid said, dabbing his eyes with a tablecloth-sized handkerchief. "Brightest witch of her age," they said. "And your dad, troublemaker, he was, but the best kind. Died protectin' his family. Both of 'em did." Harry's throat was tight. "I know. Right. Yeah. I suppose you do." Hagrid blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. "Listen, Harry. This stuff yeah said, about knowing things. Be careful who ya tell, alright? Not everyone's gonna react well to a kid who knows more than he should. It was surprisingly astute advice, coming from a man who trusted too easily and too much. I'll be careful, Harry said. I promise. Hagrid nodded, apparently satisfied. Then he reached into his coat again and produced a crumpled envelope. Almost forgot, your ticket. Platform 9 3/4. September 1st. Train leaves at 11 sharp. Harry took the ticket. Thank you, Hagrid. For everything. I'll be seein' ya at Hogwarts. Hagrid stood, knocking his chair over, and gave Harry a smile that crinkled his whole face. It's good to have ya back in our world, Harry. He left, squeezing through the cafe door with some difficulty. Harry sat alone at the table, turning the ticket over in his fingers. September 1st. Less than 5 weeks away. He thought about the diadem, sitting in the room of requirement, waiting. He thought about the diary, hidden in Malfoy Manor. He thought about the cave, the ring, the cup, the snake. He thought about the fragment of dark soul lodged behind his scar, pulsing faintly in time with his heartbeat. 6 Horcruxes to destroy. 1 Dark Lord to kill. And a school year to survive while doing it. Harry finished his tea, left money on the table, and walked out into the London morning. The weeks before September 1st passed quickly. Harry used them well. He practiced magic every night in his cupboard, using a silencing charm, the first proper charm he mastered, because necessity dictated priorities, to muffle the sounds. He worked through the first-year curriculum in 3 days. The second year took a week. By mid-August, he was casting at a 4th-year level, limited more by his 10-year-old body's magical reserves than by knowledge or technique. He also began building his occlumency shields. This was critical. Snape was a Legilimens. Dumbledore was a Legilimens. Quirrell was carrying Voldemort, who was the most dangerous Legilimens alive, on the back of his head. If any of them glimpsed what was inside Harry's mind, the consequences ranged from catastrophic to fatal. Occlumency, according to Riddle's memories, was the art of closing your mind against external intrusion. It required discipline, emotional control, and the construction of mental barriers, walls, mazes, false surfaces, that would deflect or misdirect a Legilimency probe. Riddle had been exceptional at it. Harry had all of Riddle's techniques, all of his experience, all of his understanding of the art. What Harry lacked was practice. So he practiced. Every night, for hours, he built walls in his mind. He constructed a surface layer, the thoughts and memories of a normal, slightly nervous 11-year-old boy, and buried everything else beneath it. Riddle's memories, the Horcrux locations, his plans, his fears, the cold alien intelligence that sometimes whispered in his ear, all of it went behind the walls, locked away, accessible to Harry but invisible to anyone probing his thoughts. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't fool Dumbledore at close range, not yet. But it would buy him time, and time was all he needed. On August 31st, the Dursleys drove him to King's Cross Station. Vernon was practically giddy at the prospect of getting rid of Harry for 10 months. Petunia sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Dudley took up the entire back seat, forcing Harry to wedge himself against the door with his trunk on his lap. Funny platform number, Vernon said, unable to resist a parting jab as he unloaded Harry's trunk onto a trolley. Platform 9 3/4. Don't see that on the boards, do you? No, Harry said. You wouldn't. He didn't wait for a response. He pushed his trolley into the station, found the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, and, after a moment's pause to appreciate the elegant simplicity of hiding an entire train platform behind a brick pillar, walked straight through. Platform 9 3/4 was chaos and wonder. A scarlet steam engine gleamed under a glass and iron ceiling, belching white smoke. Families swarmed the platform, dragging trunks, chasing owls, shouting goodbyes. Children hung out of train windows. A girl with bushy brown hair was lecturing her wide-eyed parents about the ceiling enchantments at Hogwarts. A red-haired family, the Weasleys, Harry knew instantly, recognizing the hand-me-down robes and the cheerful, slightly harried energy, clustered near the middle of the train. Harry's gaze found Ron Weasley. 11, gangly, with a smudge on his nose and an expression of self-conscious excitement. In another timeline, this boy would be Harry's first and best friend. In this timeline, Harry intended to make that happen on purpose. Not out of manipulation. Not the way Riddle would have done it, cultivating useful contacts and discarding them when they'd served their purpose. Harry genuinely wanted friends. He'd spent 10 years alone in a cupboard with a dead man's memories for company, and the loneliness had carved out a space inside him that no amount of strategic planning could fill. But he was honest enough with himself to admit that choosing Ron Weasley, loyal, brave, connected to a large wizarding family, eventually connected to a rat named Scabbers who was actually the traitor Peter Pettigrew, was not entirely selfless. Both things could be true. Harry was learning to live with that kind of complexity. He loaded his trunk onto the train, settled into an empty compartment, and waited. 5 minutes later, the compartment door slid open. "Anyone sitting here?" Ron Weasley pointed at the empty seat across from Harry. "Everywhere else is full." It wasn't. Harry could see empty compartments further down the train, but he understood the impulse. Starting at a new school was terrifying, and misery loved company. "Go ahead," Harry said. Ron sat down, stuffed a battered trunk under the seat, and gave Harry a tentative grin. "I'm Ron. Ron Weasley. Harry Potter." Ron's eyes went wide. His gaze flicked up to Harry's forehead. "Blimey," he said. "Are you really? Have you really got the..." Harry pushed his fringe aside. The lightning bolt scar stood out, thin and sharp. "Wicked," Ron breathed. "It's just a scar," Harry said. "Doesn't do anything interesting." This was a lie, but a small one. "Do you remember it? You know who, I mean." "When he..." "Yeah," Harry said. "I do." Something in his tone made Ron stop. The red-headed boy looked at Harry, really looked, and whatever he saw made him change the subject with an instinctive tact that Harry immediately appreciated. "Want a chocolate frog? My mum packed sandwiches, but they're corned beef and I hate corned beef." "Sure," Harry said. And smiled. "Tell me about Hogwarts." The train pulled out of the station, and Harry watched London slide past the window. In his pocket, the moleskin pouch held his shrunken notebook, his vault key, and a small glass vial he'd purchased at the apothecary, empty, waiting to hold basilisk venom. Behind his occlumency walls, 6 items burned like embers in his mind. Ahead of him, Hogwarts waited. Harry ate a chocolate frog, listened to Ron talk about Quidditch, and allowed himself, just for a moment, to feel like an 11-year-old boy on the way to school. The moment passed. The mission remained. But the chocolate was good. Chapter 4, The Cave, the Ring, and the Cost. The diary screamed when the basilisk fang pierced it. Harry knelt on the floor of an unused classroom in Hogwarts, 3 days after the Christmas holiday ended, and watched black ink pour from the wound like blood. It pooled across the stone, hissing and steaming, and a face rose from the pages, Tom Riddle at 16, handsome and furious, mouth open in a silent howl that Harry felt in his scar like a railroad spike. Then it collapsed. The ink stopped flowing. The face dissolved. The diary lay still, a ruined thing, its pages scorched and curling at the edges. Hermione stood by the door, her wand raised, her face bone white. She hadn't made a sound through the entire process, but her breathing was ragged, and her hand was shaking. "Is it done?" she whispered. "It's done." Harry sat back on his heels and let the basilisk fang rest on the floor beside him. His scar throbbed in dull, receding waves. 2 Horcruxes destroyed. The diadem and the diary. For remained, the locket, the ring, the cup, and the piece lodged in his own skull. Plus Nagini, but the snake didn't exist yet, not as a Horcrux. Riddle's memories told him that Nagini had been made into a Horcrux later, after Voldemort's resurrection. If Harry could destroy the other anchors before Voldemort returned to full power, there might never be a Nagini Horcrux at all. 5, then. Possibly 4. The math was getting better. We should clean up, Hermione said. She'd already started, vanishing the ink stains, scourgifying the floor, erasing evidence with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been cleaning up after Harry's Horcrux hunts for 2 months now and had developed a system. Harry picked up the ruined diary and turned it over in his hands. The leather cover was cracked and blistered. Riddle's name was still visible on the first page, barely, T.M. Riddle. He thought about the Christmas party at Malfoy Manor. About the moment Hermione had distracted Draco with a deliberately provocative question about Muggle technology. Don't you think it's fascinating that Muggles landed on the moon without a single spell? While Harry slipped away from the drawing room, followed the modified point-me charm through 2 corridors and down a flight of stairs, and found himself in Lucius Malfoy's private study. The diary had been in a hidden compartment behind a panel of dark wood, warded with a bloodlock that would have stopped most wizards cold. Harry had spoken the override in Parseltongue. Lucius didn't know Parseltongue, but the ward had been originally set by Voldemort himself, and Parseltongue was woven into the enchantment like a signature. The compartment had opened, and there it was. Small, black, unassuming. The soul of a 16-year-old psychopath, trapped in paper and ink. He'd pocketed it, returned to the party, and spent another hour being charming to Lucius Malfoy while the man's master's soul sat in his coat pocket. Now it was dead. And Lucius would discover the theft eventually, maybe soon, maybe not for months, depending on how often he checked. When he did, he'd know someone with access had taken it. He'd know it happened during the Christmas gathering. And the guest list was very short. Harry had planned for this. He'd left a false trail, a minor ward disturbance near the servants' entrance, suggesting an outside intruder. Hermione had planted trace evidence of a house elf's magic near the study door, which would suggest that the theft was an inside job by one of the Malfoy elves. It wouldn't hold up to serious investigation, but it would create enough confusion to buy time. Still, the clock was ticking. Lucius Malfoy was not a man who forgave theft, and the diary wasn't just a possession, it was a sacred trust from the Dark Lord. Its disappearance would make Lucius dangerous in ways that went beyond personal revenge. Harry wrapped the ruined diary in cloth and tucked it into his moleskin pouch alongside the diadem fragments and the remaining basilisk fangs. 2 down, he said. 4 to go. Hermione lowered her wand. The classroom was spotless. Harry, we need to talk about what comes next. I know. The locket and the ring. You said those are the most dangerous ones. The cave and the gaunt shack. Yeah. And you can't do those alone. Harry looked at her. She had dark circles under her eyes. They'd been up since 4 in the morning, waiting for the castle to empty enough to do this safely. But her gaze was steady, and he could see the machinery of her mind already spinning, already planning, already 3 steps ahead. No, he said. I can't do those alone. Then we need Dumbledore. The words hung in the air between them. Harry felt every argument against it rise in his throat, the risk of losing control, the danger of Dumbledore's tendency to orchestrate, the fundamental tension between Harry's need for autonomy and Dumbledore's need to manage every variable. But Hermione was right. The cave was lethal. The inferi alone would overwhelm a single wizard, even one with Riddle's knowledge. And the ring was cursed with magic so dark that touching it with bare skin would kill you within a year, and Harry didn't have the expertise to disarm the curse. Dumbledore might. Dumbledore was one of the only wizards alive who might. Okay, Harry said. Dumbledore. But on my terms. Naturally. Hermione almost smiled. When? Soon. Before Lucius discovers the diary is missing. Before anything else changes. Harry stood and brushed off his knees. I'll talk to him tonight. Dumbledore's office was at the top of a moving spiral staircase, behind a stone gargoyle that demanded a password. The password, according to the rotating pattern that Riddle's memories of Hogwarts security protocol suggested, changed monthly and was always a sweet sherbet lemon, Harry said. The gargoyle leapt aside. Harry climbed the stairs. He'd been in this office once before, through Riddle's eyes, decades ago, sitting across from Dumbledore and asking for the defense against the dark arts position with a face that was already more snake than man. The memory was vivid, the circular room, the silver instruments whirring on their tables, the sorting hat on its shelf, Fawkes the Phoenix on his perch. All of it was exactly as he remembered, and entirely different, because this time he was seeing it as Harry Potter, not Tom Riddle. The room was warm where Riddle had found it threatening. The instruments were curious where Riddle had found them invasive. Fawkes, scarlet and gold, magnificent, turned his head as Harry entered and let out a soft, musical trill that settled over Harry's skin like a bomb. "He likes you," Dumbledore said from behind his desk. He didn't seem surprised to see Harry. "Fawkes is an excellent judge of character. Please, sit down." Harry sat in the chair across from the headmaster's desk. The same chair Riddle had sat in. He pushed that thought away. "I'm here to tell you about the Horcruxes," Harry said. No preamble. No softening. Dumbledore had been waiting for this since their conversation in the hospital wing, and Harry was done stalling. Dumbledore's hands went still on the desk. The twinkle vanished from his eyes. What replaced it was something Harry had rarely seen from the old man, pure, undivided attention. "Go on," Dumbledore said quietly. "Voldemort split his soul. Multiple times. He created objects called Horcruxes, anchors that tie his spirit to the living world. As long as even one Horcrux survives, he cannot truly die. His body can be destroyed, as it was the night he attacked my parents, but his soul persists. That's why he's still out there as a wraith. That's why he possessed Quirrell. He's tethered." Dumbledore listened without interrupting. Harry could see the old man processing, cross-referencing Harry's information against his own research, his own suspicions. "I know," Dumbledore said. "I have suspected the existence of Horcruxes for some time. I was not certain of the number." 6, Harry said. "He made 6 Horcruxes. 7 pieces of soul in total, the original plus 6 fragments." Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were heavy. 6. I had estimated 2, perhaps 3. 6 is, beyond what I imagined even Tom Riddle capable of. He was nothing if not thorough." Harry leaned forward. "I've already destroyed 2. The diadem of Ravenclaw, which was hidden in the room of requirement. And the diary of Tom Riddle, which was in Lucius Malfoy's possession." The silence that followed was thick enough to stand on. "You've destroyed 2 Horcruxes," Dumbledore repeated. "You. An 11-year-old student. During your first term at Hogwarts. 12, actually. My birthday was in July." Dumbledore did not smile. "How?" "Basilisk venom. I obtained fangs from the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets." This time Dumbledore's composure actually cracked. The old man sat back in his chair, and Harry saw something he'd never expected to see on Albus Dumbledore's face, genuine, unvarnished shock. "You entered the Chamber of Secrets." "Yes." "You spoke to the basilisk." "Yes." "And it gave you its fangs." "Shed fangs, from last season." It was surprisingly accommodating. Harry paused. "It's lonely down there, Professor. 1,000 years is a long time to sit in the dark." Dumbledore stared at him for a very long moment. Then he did something unexpected, he laughed. Not a polite chuckle or a performative twinkle laugh, but a real, helpless laugh that shook his shoulders and made Fawkes ruffle his feathers in surprise. "Forgive me," Dumbledore said, wiping his eyes. "It's just, I have spent decades trying to unravel Tom Riddle's secrets, and you've accomplished more in 3 months than I have in 10 years. Using a basilisk. At age 12. He shook his head. Your mother would be simultaneously proud and horrified. Probably leaning toward horrified. Almost certainly. The laughter faded, and the gravity returned. Tell me about the remaining Horcruxes. Harry listed them. Slytherin's locket. Hidden in a sea cave on the coast, I know the location. Protected by inferi, a poison potion, and multiple layers of dark enchantment. Gaunt's ring. Hidden in the ruins of the Gaunt family shack near Little Hangleton. Cursed, anyone who puts it on will die. The ring also contains the Resurrection Stone, one of the Deathly Hallows, though Riddle didn't know that. Dumbledore's expression shifted at the mention of the Hallows. Something old and painful moved behind his eyes. Harry noticed but didn't comment. Hufflepuff's cup, Harry continued. In the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. That one requires a separate plan. Gringotts security is formidable, and the Lestrange vault has additional protections. And the sixth. Harry touched his scar. The gesture was small, almost unconscious, and he saw the moment Dumbledore understood. The old man's face went grey. No, Dumbledore whispered. Yes. The night he tried to kill me, the curse rebounded and shattered a piece of his soul. That fragment lodged in the nearest living thing. Me. Harry kept his voice even. Clinical. He'd had years to sit with this knowledge, and he'd built walls around the horror of it that were thick enough to function behind. I am the Horcrux he never meant to make. Dumbledore rose from his chair. He walked to the window and stood with his back to Harry, looking out over the grounds. His shoulders were rigid. His hands, clasped behind his back, were trembling. I suspected, he said, so quietly Harry almost missed it. From the moment you told me about the memories. I suspected, and I hoped I was wrong. You weren't wrong. Harry. Dumbledore turned. His eyes were bright, not with the twinkle, but with unshed tears. Do you understand what this means? It means that to destroy all of Voldemort's Horcruxes, I have to die. The word landed in the room like a stone in still water. Fawkes let out a low, mournful note. Or be hit with another killing curse, Harry added. Which amounts to the same thing, practically speaking. Although. He paused, choosing his next words with care. Riddle's research suggested that the killing curse destroys the soul fragment attached to a living vessel without necessarily killing the vessel itself. If the victim's own soul is intact and anchored by powerful enough magic, sacrificial protection, for example, there's a theoretical chance of survival. Theoretical, Dumbledore echoed. I didn't say it was a good chance. Dumbledore crossed back to his desk and sat down heavily. He looked old. Not the performative, grandfatherly old that was his public persona, but genuinely, bone-deep old. A man who'd lived too long and seen too much and was now watching a 12-year-old boy discuss his own probable death with the composure of a soldier. We will find another way, Dumbledore said. Maybe. But not today. Harry leaned forward. Today, I need your help with the cave and the ring. Those are the next two targets, and I can't take them alone. The cave requires a second wizard, someone to manage the inferi while I retrieve the locket. And the ring's curse is beyond my ability to disarm. You want me to come with you? Yes. Into a cave full of inferi and a shack full of cursed dark artifacts. Yes. During term time. Easter holiday. 2 weeks. We do the cave first, then the ring. 1 per day, with recovery time between. Dumbledore studied him. The old man's expression had shifted again, the grief was still there, banked like coals, but over it lay something that looked like respect. Grudging, complicated, earned. You've planned this meticulously, Dumbledore said. I've had a lot of time to plan. So you have. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Then he opened a drawer in his desk and withdrew a small, silver instrument, a put-outer, Harry recognized, though Dumbledore called it a deluminator. He turned it over in his long fingers absently. "I will help you," Dumbledore said. "On 2 conditions. First, you tell me everything. Not just the Horcrux locations, everything you know about Tom Riddle's defenses, his allies, his contingency plans. No more secrets between us." "Agreed." "Second, you do not face the final Horcrux, the one in your scar, without me. When that time comes, we face it together. You do not sacrifice yourself alone in the dark." Harry's throat tightened. He swallowed against it. "Agreed," he said. Dumbledore nodded. He placed the deluminator back in the drawer and closed it with a soft click. "Easter holiday, then," he said. "I suggest we spend the intervening weeks preparing. I have some expertise in curse breaking that may be useful for the ring, and I would like to review everything you know about the cave's defenses. I'll write it all down for you." "Excellent. And Harry?" "Yes, Professor. Thank you for trusting me with this." Harry stood. "Thank you for not locking me in a room." The twinkle returned, faint, but real. "The thought crossed my mind. I know." Harry left the office and walked back to Gryffindor Tower through corridors that were quiet and lamplit and smelled of old stone and possibility. His scar was calm. The fragment behind it was dormant, sleeping, if such a thing could sleep. He thought about the conversation he'd just had. About the look on Dumbledore's face when he'd understood about the scar. About the old man's voice cracking on the word no. Dumbledore cared about him. Not just as a weapon, not just as a chess piece, as a person. A child. The child of 2 people he'd loved and failed to protect. Harry had spent years preparing to manage Dumbledore. To outmaneuver him, outwit him, stay 3 steps ahead. He hadn't prepared for the possibility that the old man's kindness might be genuine, and that accepting it might feel like putting down a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there. He climbed through the portrait hole and found Hermione curled in an armchair by the fire, a book open on her lap, very obviously not reading. "Well," she said. "He's in." Hermione let out a breath she'd apparently been holding since Harry left. "He believed you." "About all of it?" "He already suspected most of it. I just confirmed." Harry sat down in the chair across from her. "We're doing the cave and the ring over Easter. Dumbledore's coming. Both of you. Alone. Into a cave full of inferi, yes. And then a shack with a cursed ring. And then, eventually, Gringotts for the cup. And then." He touched his scar. "The last one." Hermione's eyes followed his hand. She knew. He'd told her 2 weeks ago, sitting in this same spot, and she'd gone to the girls' bathroom and cried for 20 minutes and then come back and started researching protective magic with a ferocity that bordered on violence. "We'll figure it out," she said. "The scar. There has to be a way. Maybe. Not maybe. We will." Her jaw was set. Her eyes were fierce. "You are not going to die, Harry Potter. I won't allow it." "You won't allow it," he repeated, and despite everything, the Horcruxes, the war, the dark thing sleeping behind his forehead, he smiled. "Good to know. I'm serious." "I know you are. That's what makes it terrifying." The weeks between January and Easter were dense with preparation. Harry and Dumbledore met twice a week in the headmaster's office, going over the details of Riddle's defenses with the thoroughness of generals planning an invasion. Harry laid out everything: the cave's location, a cliff face on the coast near the orphanage where Riddle had terrorized fellow children as a boy, the boat enchantment, 1 wizard at a time, keyed to magical power, the basin of potion, must be drunk, causes hallucinations and agony, cannot be vanished or siphoned, and the inferi, dozens of them, lurking in the black water, triggered by disturbance. Dumbledore absorbed it all with the focus of a man who'd spent 60 years fighting dark magic and still found new reasons to be appalled. The potion, Dumbledore said, during their third meeting. You say it must be drunk. There's no alternative. Riddle designed it specifically to prevent any method of removal except consumption. Vanishing charms don't work. Siphoning charms don't work. Physical containers can't hold it, it passes through them. The only way to empty the basin is to drink. And the effects? Extreme thirst. Pain. Hallucinations, usually the drinker's worst memories, amplified. Psychological breakdown. It doesn't kill directly, but it incapacitates completely. The drinker becomes helpless, which is when the inferi are triggered by the victim's attempts to reach the water for relief. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. I will drink it, he said. Professor, it must be me. You are 12 years old, carrying a fragment of Voldemort's soul. The psychological effects of this potion, combined with the dark memories already in your mind, could cause irreversible damage. I am old, Harry. I have a lifetime of mental fortitude to draw on, and considerably less to lose. I don't accept that. You don't have to accept it. But you do have to be practical. Dumbledore's tone brooked no argument. I will drink the potion. You will retrieve the locket. And you will not, under any circumstances, stop feeding me the potion, no matter what I say or do while under its influence. Is that understood? Harry clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue. Every fiber of Riddle's strategic mind screamed that letting your most powerful ally incapacitate himself was idiotic. But Dumbledore was right, the potion would tear through Harry's mind like wildfire through a forest already burning. The Riddle memories would become weapons, turned against him, and Harry might not come back from that. Understood, he said. Good. Now, the ring. The ring was, in some ways, more dangerous than the cave. The gaunt shack was warded with concealment charms and surrounded by traps, minor ones, designed to discourage casual exploration. But the ring itself carried a curse of extraordinary power, layered into the gold by Voldemort with the specific intent of killing anyone who tried to claim it. The curse was triggered by touch, specifically, by putting the ring on. It was a withering curse, a slow necrosis that would spread from the point of contact through the body over approximately 12 months, killing the victim by degrees. There was no known counter-curse. Snape might be able to slow it, his knowledge of dark magic was extensive, but not stop it. The key is not to put the ring on, Harry said. Which sounds obvious, but the ring has a compulsion enchantment woven into the curse. It wants to be worn. Anyone in proximity will feel drawn to it. The resurrection stone amplifies the effect, it calls to people who've lost someone, makes them think that wearing the ring will bring back the dead. Dumbledore went very still. Harry watched the old man's face and saw the danger. Dumbledore had lost people. His sister, Ariana, killed in a three-way duel between Dumbledore, his brother Aberforth, and Gellert Grindelwald. The guilt of that loss had shaped Dumbledore's entire life. If the ring's compulsion played on that guilt. Professor, Harry said carefully. The ring will try to tempt you. It will promise you things. Things about your family. Something flickered in Dumbledore's eyes. You know about Ariana. I know what Riddle knew. Which is less than you fear and more than you'd like. Dumbledore's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. You have a gift for uncomfortable honesty, Harry. I learned it from someone who never had any honesty at all. It seemed like a useful correction. Indeed. Dumbledore folded his hands on the desk. I appreciate the warning. I will be on my guard. I'd feel better if you let me handle the ring. Absolutely not. The compulsion affects anyone with a heartbeat. You've lost your parents, Harry. The ring would use them. I know what the ring will try. I've seen Riddle's design from the inside. I know where the compulsion hooks in, how it builds, how to resist it. And I know myself, Dumbledore said, with a quiet firmness that ended the discussion. I have spent a lifetime learning to master my own weaknesses. I will not be mastered by a ring. Harry recognized the tone. Dumbledore had made his decision, and no amount of argument would shift it. The old man was brilliant, powerful, and maddeningly stubborn, a combination that made him both the perfect ally and the most frustrating person Harry had ever worked with. Fine, Harry said. But I'm standing right next to you when you pick it up. And if I see the curse take hold, I'm cutting your hand off. That seems slightly excessive. It's not. Trust me. Easter arrived on a gray, damp Saturday. Harry told Ron he was staying at Hogwarts to study, a lie that Ron accepted with suspicious ease, and met Dumbledore at the front gates at dawn. The headmaster was dressed not in his usual robes but in a traveling cloak of dark blue, plain and practical. His wand, the Elder Wand, though Harry had decided not to mention his knowledge of that particular secret today, was holstered at his hip. He looked less like a headmaster and more like what he actually was, one of the most dangerous wizards alive, going to war. Ready? Dumbledore asked. Let's go. They apparat. Side along, with Dumbledore driving, the sensation was like being squeezed through a tube of toothpaste, and Harry stumbled on the landing, his 12-year-old body protesting the violence of magical teleportation. They stood on a cliff. Below, the sea smashed against rocks with a sound like continuous thunder. The air was salt and cold and tasted of winter. Ahead, barely visible in the grey light, a narrow path wound down the cliff face toward a dark opening in the rock. The cave. Charming, Dumbledore observed. He came here as a child, Harry said. From the orphanage. He brought 2 other children, Amy Benson and Dennis Bishop. Terrorized them. Nobody ever found out what he did, but they were never the same afterward. He stared at the cave mouth. This is where it started. Where he discovered he could make people afraid. And so he returned to it. To hide a piece of his soul in the place where he first felt powerful. Dumbledore's voice was thoughtful. Tom always did have a flair for the symbolic. They descended the path. The cave mouth was narrow, they had to turn sideways to enter, and opened into a cavern that stretched back into darkness. The floor was slick. Water dripped from unseen heights. The air changed immediately, colder, heavier, dense with magic that pressed against Harry's skin like a physical weight. The entrance to the inner cave requires blood, Harry said. A payment. Riddle designed it as a test, only someone willing to sacrifice would get through. Blood magic. Dumbledore's tone carried distaste but not surprise. How much? A few drops. It's symbolic, not structural. Dumbledore drew a thin silver knife from his cloak, pressed it to his palm, and let several drops of blood fall against the cave wall. The rock shimmered, rippled, and dissolved, revealing a passage that led deeper into the cliff. They walked through. The inner cave was vast, a cathedral of black stone surrounding a lake of water so dark and still it looked like polished obsidian. In the center of the lake, barely visible, a small island glowed with a faint, sickly green light. The basin, Harry said. The locket is at the bottom, beneath the potion. And the inferi? In the water. They'll stay dormant unless the surface is disturbed significantly. Don't touch the water. Dumbledore raised his wand and swept it in a wide arc. A chain emerged from the black water, invisible until summoned, attached to a small boat that surfaced with barely a ripple. One at a time, Harry said. The boat is enchanted to carry one wizard. It measures magical power, not physical passengers, so it should carry us both if one of us is a 12-year-old whose magical signature is still developing, Dumbledore finished. Yes, I suspect Voldemort did not anticipate an underage wizard making this journey. They climbed into the boat. It sank dangerously low but held, and began to glide across the lake, pulled by the enchanted chain. The water was inches from the gunwale. Harry kept his hands inside the boat and tried not to think about what lay beneath the surface. Halfway across, he saw them. Shapes in the water. Pale, bloated, drifting. Faces turned upward, eyes open and empty. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Inferi. The animated dead, bound to serve as guardians. Men, women, Harry's stomach lurched, children. Riddle had not been selective in his material. Dumbledore looked at the inferi with an expression of profound sadness. Even in death, he gives them no peace. No. He never did. The boat reached the island. They stepped onto a flat stone surface, maybe 10 feet across, dominated by a stone basin on a pedestal. The basin was filled with a glowing emerald liquid, the potion, and at the bottom, barely visible through the glow, something small and gold. There it is, Harry said. Dumbledore approached the basin. He produced a crystal goblet from inside his cloak, conjured or brought, Harry wasn't sure, and dipped it into the potion. The liquid filled the goblet without resistance. Remember, Harry said. You have to drink all of it. No matter what happens. No matter what you say. I remember. Dumbledore looked at the goblet. Looked at Harry. And in his eyes, Harry saw something he hadn't expected, trust. Complete, unguarded trust. The old man was putting his life in the hands of a 12-year-old boy, and he was doing it without reservation. If anything goes wrong, Dumbledore said, your priority is the locket. Not me. The locket. I'll get the locket. But nothing's going to go wrong. Optimism becomes you, Harry. Dumbledore raised the goblet. Here's to improbable outcomes. He drank. The first goblet went down smoothly. Dumbledore's expression tightened, the taste was clearly foul, but he swallowed and extended the goblet for a refill. The second goblet made him wince. His hand shook slightly as he dipped for the third. By the fourth, the potion had taken hold. Dumbledore's face contorted. His eyes went glassy, unfocused, staring at something Harry couldn't see. His lips moved, words, fragments, barely audible over the silence of the cave. No, please. Ariana, I didn't mean to. I didn't know. Harry's chest constricted. He refilled the goblet and pressed it to Dumbledore's lips. Drink, Professor. You have to drink. Dumbledore tried to turn away. His body convulsed. Tears streamed down his face, tears from a man Harry had never seen shed a single one. Make it stop. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ariana, please. Drink. Harry's voice was hard. He had to be hard. Compassion would kill them both. He tilted the goblet. Dumbledore swallowed, gagging, and the potion burned its way down. Harry refilled immediately, trying not to look at the old man's eyes, trying not to hear the broken, anguished words that poured from him between swallows. Goblet 5. 6. 7. Kill me, Dumbledore whispered. Please. Kill me instead. Not her. Not her. Harry's hand trembled. He clenched it into a fist and kept pouring. Goblet 8. 9. The basin was almost empty. The green glow was fading. Harry could see the locket clearly now, small, heavy, ornate, bearing the mark of Slytherin. One more, Harry said. One more and it's done. Dumbledore's body was limp. Harry had to hold his head up, tilt the goblet with one hand, pour with the other. The old man swallowed reflexively, no longer conscious enough to resist. The last drop drained from the basin. Harry dropped the goblet, reached in, and closed his fist around the locket. It was ice cold. The Horcrux inside it thrashed against his grip like a living thing, but Harry's hand was steady, and he stuffed the locket into the moleskin pouch before it could fight free. Professor. Professor, it's done. We have it. Dumbledore's eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow and rapid. His skin was gray. "Water," he croaked. "Please, water." The only water was in the lake. The lake full of inferi. Harry looked at the dark, still surface. Looked at Dumbledore, shaking and delirious on the stone floor. Looked at his wand. He could conjure water. Aguamenti, a simple charm. But Riddle's design was specific: conjured water would vanish before it reached the drinker's lips. The only water that would quench the thirst was the lake water, and touching the lake would wake the dead. Harry conjured water anyway. As expected, the stream from his wand evaporated inches from Dumbledore's mouth. The old man groaned. "Sorry," Harry muttered. "I'm so sorry." He had two options. Leave Dumbledore suffering until they could escape and find water outside the cave. Or touch the lake and fight the inferi. Harry looked at the pouch containing the locket. He thought about the mission, about the remaining Horcruxes, about everything that still needed to be done. Then he looked at Dumbledore, crumpled on the ground, whispering his dead sister's name. Harry pointed his wand at the lake and summoned water. The surface shattered. They came from everywhere. Erupting from the black water in a wave of pale, grasping limbs, corpses animated by dark magic, mouths open, eyes empty, climbing over each other in their frenzy to reach the island. The sound was indescribable, the wet slap of dead flesh on stone, the gurgling moan of throats that no longer breathed. Harry didn't panic. He'd known this was coming. He'd prepared for this specific moment. Incendio Maxima. The fire that erupted from his wand wasn't the modest flame of a first-year spell. It was a roaring torrent, a wall of fire that swept across the lake's surface, igniting the inferi as they climbed. The dead burned. They didn't scream, they couldn't, but they thrashed and writhed and fell back into the water, and for a moment, the assault broke. Then more came. Always more. Rising from depths Harry couldn't see, surging toward the island in an endless tide. Harry's magic was draining fast. He was 12, and sustained combat magic burned through his reserves like a bonfire through paper. He needed something bigger. Something that would end this. He thought of Riddle. Of the dark spells lurking in his inherited knowledge, spells that could turn the inferi to ash, spells that could drain the lake, spells that could rip the cave apart. He could feel them pressing against the inside of his skull, eager to be used. Instead, he pointed his wand at the ceiling of the cave and shouted, "Flagrate circumscriptus." A ring of fire exploded from his wand tip and expanded outward, not attacking the inferi directly but creating a perimeter, a blazing circle around the entire island, burning on the water's surface, fed by Harry's magic and his will and his absolute refusal to let these things touch Dumbledore. The inferi recoiled. They pressed against the fire line, testing it, and fell back. The circle held. Harry stood at the center of the island, wand raised, arms shaking, sweat running down his face, and held the fire. "Professor," he said, through clenched teeth. "I need you to get up now. We need to leave." Dumbledore stirred. His eyes opened, clouded, confused, but present. "Harry. We're in the cave. I've got the locket. The inferi are awake. I need you to get us out of here." Dumbledore looked at the wall of fire. Looked at the inferi pressing against it. Looked at Harry, a 12-year-old boy holding back an army of the dead through sheer force of will. Something kindled in the old man's eyes. Not just awareness, fury. The cold, righteous fury of one of the most powerful wizards who had ever lived, directed at the abomination surrounding them. Dumbledore rose to his feet. He raised his wand, the Elder Wand, and fire erupted. Not Harry's fire. Dumbledore's fire was different, hotter, brighter, controlled with a precision that made Harry's efforts look like a child playing with matches. A firestorm swept across the lake, incinerating every inferius in its path. The cave filled with light and heat, and the dead burned, and the water boiled, and then, silence. Steam. The hiss of cooling stone. Dumbledore swayed. Harry caught his arm. The boat, Harry said. Come on. They made it back across the lake. The water was hot now, steaming, littered with charred remains. The boat carried them to the far shore. They climbed out, stumbled through the passage, through the outer cave, and emerged onto the cliff path in the grey morning light. The sea air hit Harry like a slap. He gulped it in, salt, cold, clean, and felt his magic shudder and settle, like an engine cooling after being redlined. Dumbledore collapsed against the cliff face. He was shaking violently, his face ashen, but his eyes were clear. Water, Harry said, and this time when he cast Aguamenti, a stream of clean water poured from his wand into the old man's open mouth. Outside the cave, outside Riddle's enchantments, the spell worked perfectly. Dumbledore drank until the stream ran out. Then he looked at Harry, and his expression was one Harry had never seen from anyone, ever. You held them off, Dumbledore said. Alone. While I was incapacitated. You told me the locket was the priority. And you chose to save me instead of running. That wasn't a choice. That was obvious. Dumbledore closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. Your mother, he said softly. You have her heart. Not just her eyes. Harry didn't trust himself to respond to that. He pulled the moleskin pouch from his pocket and withdrew the locket. It sat on his palm, gold and green and heavy with malice. The Horcrux inside it pulsed against his skin. He could feel its fury, the fragment knew what was coming. Should we destroy it now? Dumbledore asked. No. Harry tucked it back into the pouch. Not here. We're both exhausted, and destroying a Horcrux takes focus. Tomorrow. Back at Hogwarts. You're being sensible, Dumbledore said. I'm impressed. I'm being tired. It's a different thing. They apparat back to Hogwarts. The journey was rougher this time, Dumbledore's magic was depleted, and the landing was hard, both of them hitting the ground outside the school gates. Hagrid, who was crossing the grounds with a bucket of something that smelled truly terrible, saw them and came running. Professor Dumbledore. What happened? Yeah, look, I'm quite all right, Hagrid. Mr. Potter and I were conducting some extracurricular research. Nothing to worry about. Hagrid looked unconvinced. He looked at Harry, muddy, grey-faced, smelling of smoke and salt, and his beetled eyebrows drew together. Extracurricular research, Hagrid repeated. That's right, Harry said. Advanced defense against the dark arts. In the ocean. Practical component. Hagrid shook his head. You two are going to be the death of me. He helped Dumbledore to the castle. Harry trailed behind, hands in his pockets, and counted his victories. 3 Horcruxes secured. 2 destroyed, 1 in his pouch. Tomorrow, the locket would die. Then the ring. Then the cup. Then, he didn't think about the last one. Not yet. The locket died screaming. Harry did it in Dumbledore's office, this time, with the old man watching from his chair, wrapped in a blanket, drinking hot chocolate that Madame Pomfrey had insisted upon. The basilisk fong punctured the locket's face, and black smoke erupted, thicker than the diary, louder than the diadem, carrying with it a blast of cold air and a voice that shrieked in Parseltongue, You will die alone, you will die unloved, you are nothing, nothing. Harry held the fong steady until the screaming stopped. 3 destroyed. 3 to go. Remarkable, Dumbledore murmured. Each time, the fragment tries to defend itself. They get stronger as you get closer to the primary soul. The ring will be worse. The cup will be worse than that. And the last one? Harry wiped black residue off his hands. Let's deal with the ring first. They went to Little Hangleton the next afternoon. The gaunt shack stood at the edge of a wood, half collapsed, overgrown with weeds and ivy. It looked like a place that had been dying for a long time and had finally given up. The door hung on one hinge. The windows were dark. Harry stood outside and felt Riddle's memories pulse. This was the house where Tom Riddle's mother had been born. Where Mary P. Gaunt had lived in squalor and abuse, tormented by her father and brother, until she'd used a love potion on a muggle named Tom Riddle Sr. and fled. The house where the Gaunt family's madness had festered, generation after generation, the noble blood of Slytherin curdled into cruelty and decline. Riddle had come here in 1943. 16 years old, fresh from murdering his father's family in the mansion up the hill. He'd found Morphin Gaunt, his uncle, half-mad, drunk on homebrewed fire whiskey, and taken the ring from his finger. Then he'd modified Morphin's memory, framed him for the Riddle murders, and walked away with a Horcrux waiting to be born. Charming family history, Harry muttered. All families have their darkness, Dumbledore said. Some more than others. They entered. The shack was exactly as Riddle's memories depicted, one room, a dirt floor, a dead snake nailed to the door. Mold climbed the walls. The air smelled of rot and old magic. The ring was hidden beneath a floorboard near the hearth. Harry pointed to the spot. There. Under that board. Do not touch it with bare hands. Do not look at it for more than a few seconds. And do not, Professor, do not, put it on. You've made that point several times now. Because it's the most important point I'll ever make. Dumbledore knelt, raised his wand, and lifted the floorboard with a charm. Beneath it, nestled in the dirt, was a gold ring with a black stone set in its face. The Peveril crest, the Deathly Hallows symbol, was etched into the stone. Even from 5 feet away, Harry could feel the compulsion. The ring called. It whispered without sound, promising things, his mother's voice, his father's laugh, a family he'd never had. Come closer. Pick me up. Put me on. See what I can give you. Harry pressed his occlumency walls up hard and gritted his teeth. Dumbledore stood motionless, staring at the ring. His hand was outstretched. His fingers were trembling. Professor. No response. Dumbledore's eyes were fixed on the black stone. His lips were moving. Professor. Ariana, Dumbledore whispered. I could see her. I could tell her. Harry moved. He stepped between Dumbledore and the ring, breaking the line of sight, and the old man blinked. The glazed look in his eyes cleared. He stumbled back a step, and his face twisted with self-recrimination so sharp it was painful to witness. Forgive me, Dumbledore said. You warned me. I was not prepared for how strong, nobody is. That's the point. Harry kept his body between Dumbledore and the floorboard. Let me do this. Please. Dumbledore hesitated. The war played out across his face, pride against practicality, the need to control against the evidence that control had just failed. Use the Fong, he said finally. Don't touch the ring. Don't look at the stone. Destroy it in the ground where it lies. Harry turned back to the floorboard. He drew the basilisk Fong from his pouch. He did not look at the stone. He focused instead on the gold band, the metal, the Horcrux, the fragment of soul that was even now screaming at him in frequencies only his scar could hear. He drove the Fong down. The ring shrieked. The black stone cracked. The gold band split in two, and a blast of dark magic erupted upward, a geyser of black smoke and green fire that blew the roof off the shack and sent Harry tumbling backward into Dumbledore's arms. They hit the dirt floor together, Dumbledore shielding Harry with his body as debris rained down around them. The dark magic dissipated, howling, furious, impotent, and then the shack was silent except for the patter of falling dust and the distant sound of birds. Harry lay on his back, staring up at the sky through the ruined roof, and gasped for air. "For," he said. "For destroyed." Dumbledore sat up slowly. He was covered in dust and his hat was gone, but his eyes were bright with something like wonder. 4, he agreed. The cup and the last one remain. Harry nodded. He sat up, wincing. A piece of the roof had caught his shoulder, and looked at the ruined ring. The gold band was shattered. The black stone, cracked down the middle, lay in the dirt. The resurrection stone. One of the 3 deathly hallows. Broken, but perhaps still functional, the hallows were not easily destroyed. Harry picked it up. Not the ring, just the stone, separated from the cursed metal. He held it in his palm and felt nothing. No compulsion. No whisper. The Horcrux was gone, and without it, the stone was just a stone. Cracked and dark and silent. He pocketed it anyway. Just in case. They apparat back to Hogwarts as the sun set over Little Hangleton. Dumbledore was stronger this time. The ring hadn't required him to drink poison, only to resist temptation, and his recovery was quicker. At the school gates, the old man paused. Harry. Yes, Professor. When this is over, when all of this is over, I would like to sit down with you and have a conversation that has nothing to do with Horcruxes or Dark Lords or the fate of the wizarding world. I would like to talk about your mother. And your father. And the people they were, beyond the war. Harry's throat ached. I'd like that too. Good. Dumbledore placed a hand on Harry's shoulder, light, brief, warm. You've done something extraordinary, Harry. Don't forget to be a child sometimes, in between saving the world. I'll try. That's all any of us can do. They walked through the gates and up the path to the castle. The lights of Hogwarts blazed in the dusk, warm and golden, and Harry thought about the cup in the Lestrange vault, and the thing in his scar, and the long road still ahead. But for tonight, just for tonight, for Horcruxes were dead, and the world was a little bit lighter, and the old man walking beside him had called him extraordinary, and that was enough. He found Ron in the common room, demolishing a plate of sandwiches. Where've you been all day? You missed Quidditch practice. Wood's going mental. Had to help Dumbledore with something. What, again? What's the old man got you doing, building a second castle? Harry dropped into the chair beside him and grabbed a sandwich. Something like that. You look terrible, by the way. Thanks, Ron. Just being honest. Ron pushed the plate toward him. Eat. You're skinnier than my mum would tolerate, and she's not even here. Harry ate. The sandwich was ham and cheese, slightly stale, and absolutely delicious. Ron watched him with an expression that was trying to be casual and failing, the same expression he'd been wearing more and more often, the look of a boy who knew his best friend was carrying something enormous and was waiting, with a patience that cost him more than he'd ever admit, to be told what it was. Soon, Harry thought. Very soon, Ron would know everything. He deserved that. He'd earned it with every sandwich, every chess game, every moment of loyalty given freely and without condition. But not tonight. Tonight, Harry ate his sandwich and let himself rest, and the fire crackled, and the common room was warm, and somewhere far away, the Dark Lord who had torn his soul into pieces was one step closer to oblivion. 4 down. 2 to go. Chapter 5, The Rat, the Dog, and the Snake. Harry told Ron everything on a Tuesday. They sat in the room of requirement. Harry had configured it as a small, warm room with 2 armchairs and a fire, because this conversation needed privacy and comfort in equal measure. Hermione was there too, perched on the arm of Harry's chair, a silent show of solidarity. Ron listened without interrupting. That alone told Harry how seriously he was taking it. Ron Weasley had opinions about everything and shared them freely, loudly, and often. Ron Weasley sitting in silence for 45 minutes was an event roughly as rare as a solar eclipse. Harry told him about the memories. About Riddle's life, poured into his infant skull. About the Horcruxes, the word, finally spoken aloud to Ron, landed in the room like a dropped stone. About the diadem and the diary, already destroyed. About the locket and the ring, destroyed with Dumbledore over Easter. About the cup, still locked in Gringotts. About the fragment in his scar. He told Ron about his mother's sacrifice. About Dumbledore's involvement. About the plan. And then he told Ron about Scabbers. This was the part Harry had been dreading. He'd rehearsed it a dozen ways, tried to find the gentlest angle of approach, and eventually concluded that there was no gentle way to tell your best friend that his pet rat was a man who'd murdered 12 people and betrayed Harry's parents to Voldemort. So he said it straight. Scabbers isn't a rat. He's an animagus, a wizard who can transform into an animal. His real name is Peter Pettigrew. He was my parents' friend, their secret keeper, and he sold them to Voldemort. After Voldemort fell, Pettigrew faked his own death, cut off his own finger to leave as evidence, killed 12 muggles in the explosion, and framed Sirius Black for all of it. He's been hiding as a rat for 11 years. In your family's house. In your pocket. The silence that followed was not like the earlier silences. Those had been attentive, absorptive. This silence was a held breath before a detonation. Ron's face went through a sequence of expressions so rapid they blurred: confusion, disbelief, horror, denial, and then, worst of all, the slow, terrible dawn of recognition. The finger, Ron said. His voice was strange. Flat. Scabbers is missing a toe. Yes. He's been in my family for 12 years. Percy had him first. He's old for a rat. Mum always said. Ron stopped. His hands were gripping the arms of the chair so hard his knuckles were white. He sleeps in my bed, Harry. I know. He's been in my house. With my family. With Ginny. Ron's voice cracked on his sister's name, and the flatness broke, replaced by something hot and jagged. A Death Eater. A murderer. Sleeping next to my little sister. Ron, does he know? Does he know about you? About the Horcruxes? No. As far as Pettigrew knows, he's a rat living a quiet life with a wizarding family. He's hiding. He's terrified. Voldemort's followers would kill him for being a traitor. He betrayed his master by not seeking him out after the fall. And the Order of the Phoenix would kill him for betraying the Potters. He's trapped between two sides that both want him dead, so he stays a rat. Good. The word was sharp enough to cut. Let both sides have him. Hermione put a hand on Ron's arm. He flinched but didn't pull away. We need him alive, Harry said. At least long enough to clear Sirius Black. Ron looked up. Sirius Black. The mass murderer in Azkaban. He didn't murder anyone. He was framed. Pettigrew killed those 12 muggles, Pettigrew faked his death, and Sirius was convicted without a trial because Bartemius Crouch was running the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and didn't bother with due process during wartime. Without a trial. Without a trial. Sirius Black has been in Azkaban for 11 years for a crime he didn't commit. He's my godfather. Ron stared at him. Then he leaned back in his chair, pressed his hands over his face, and let out a long, shaky breath. This is insane, he said, muffled by his palms. Yes. Like, genuinely, properly insane. Yes. Ron dropped his hands. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Right. So what do we do about the rat? Harry felt something unlock in his chest. Not relief, exactly, more like the sensation of a weight being redistributed. He'd carried this alone for so long that sharing it, even partially, felt like setting down a suitcase he'd forgotten he was holding. We expose him, Harry said. Publicly, with witnesses, in a way that forces the Ministry to act. We need Pettigrew alive and in human form, confessing, in front of people who matter. How? Carefully. The plan took 3 weeks to build. Harry, Ron, and Hermione worked in the room of requirement every evening, mapping out the operation with the detail of a military campaign. The core challenge was simple: force Pettigrew out of his animagus form, keep him contained, and present him to authorities who couldn't ignore the evidence. The animagus reversal spell was the key, homorphous, a charm that forced an animagus back into human shape. It was NEWT-level magic, complex but not beyond Harry's capabilities given Riddle's knowledge. The problem was that Pettigrew would bolt the instant he suspected danger. Rats were fast, small, and could squeeze through gaps that no spell could follow. "We need to contain him first," Hermione said, drawing diagrams on parchment. "A space he can't escape from. Anti-apparition wards, physical barriers, an anti-animagus ward to prevent him from retransforming once he's forced back." "Can you do an anti-animagus ward?" Ron asked. "I can learn," Hermione said, in the tone of voice that meant she'd already started. "We also need witnesses," Harry said. "Not just students, adults. Professors. Ministry officials if we can manage it." "McGonagall," Ron said immediately. "She's fair. She'd listen. And Dumbledore. He already knows the broad strokes. I'll bring him in." "What about Snape?" Hermione asked. Harry considered. Snape was complicated. The man loathed Sirius Black, a hatred rooted in their shared, vicious history at Hogwarts, and would not be a sympathetic audience for a claim of Black's innocence. But Snape was also a former Death Eater who knew Pettigrew's face, and his testimony that the rat was indeed Peter Pettigrew would carry weight that no student's word could match. "Snape comes later," Harry said. "After Pettigrew is exposed. Not before." They settled on a date, the last Saturday before end-of-term exams. The Great Hall would be full for lunch. McGonagall would be present. Dumbledore would be present. They'd lure Pettigrew into a prepared space, the antechamber behind the Great Hall, where the first years had waited before the sorting, spring the anti-animagus ward, and force the reversal in front of witnesses pulled from the hall. "One thing," Ron said, on the night before the operation. They were in the room of requirement, going over the plan for the 5th time. Ron had been uncharacteristically quiet all evening, and now he sat forward in his chair with his elbows on his knees. "I want to be the one who carries him in." Harry looked at him. "Ron, if he suspects, he won't suspect. He's my rat. I carry him everywhere. I'll put him in the antechamber. Hermione seals the door and sets the ward. You do the reversal spell." "Simple." "It's not simple. If something goes wrong, he's been sleeping in my bed for 2 years." Ron's voice was low and hard and absolutely steady. "He was in Percy's pocket for 3 years before that. He's eaten at my family's table. My mum has fed him." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "I get to be the one who puts him in the box. That's mine." Harry looked at Hermione. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. "Okay," Harry said. "He's yours." Saturday came bright and clear. Late May, the grounds green and lush, the lake glittering under a cloudless sky. The kind of day that made you forget Dark Lords and Horcruxes existed. Harry spent the morning in a state of controlled tension, attending breakfast, pretending to study, running through contingencies in his head. He'd briefed Dumbledore the previous evening, the headmaster had listened gravely and agreed to position himself near the antechamber during lunch, ready to intervene if needed. "You're certain about this?" Dumbledore had asked. "As certain as I've been about anything. The implications, if you're right, an innocent man in Azkaban for 11 years, I'm right, Professor. I was there when Pettigrew was made secret keeper. In the memories. I watched Voldemort receive the information. Pettigrew was the spy. Sirius was the decoy." Dumbledore had closed his eyes. "I attended no trial," he said quietly. "Because there was no trial. In the chaos after Voldemort's fall, I assumed, who pride myself on never assuming, that the Ministry had conducted due diligence. I was wrong. You can make it right now. Yes. I can try. At 11:45, Ron collected Scabbers from the dormitory. The rat was asleep, curled in the pocket of Ron's robes, oblivious. Ron's face was the color of old parchment, but his hands were steady. Ready? Harry asked. No. Let's go. They moved through the castle in a loose formation, Ron first, carrying the rat, Harry behind, wand in his sleeve, Hermione bringing up the rear, her own wand out and a piece of parchment covered in word equations clutched in her free hand. The antechamber was empty, as expected. It was a small stone room, windowless, with one door leading to the entrance hall and another leading to the Great Hall. Hermione entered first, swept the room with a detection charm, and nodded. Clear. Give me 2 minutes. She began casting. The anti-animagus ward was her creation, adapted from a standard containment ward, modified using principles she'd found in an obscure Transfiguration journal. She'd tested it on McGonagall's cat form, without McGonagall's knowledge, which had led to an extremely awkward incident involving a suddenly human professor in the staff room and a lot of screaming. The ward worked. It created a field that disrupted the animagus transformation, locking any animagus in their current form or, if combined with a reversal spell, forcing them back to human shape. Hermione laid the ward in a circle on the stone floor, invisible to the eye but buzzing faintly with magic. She sealed the entrance hall door with a colloportus. She placed a secondary ward on the Great Hall door, not a lock, because they needed witnesses to enter, but an alarm that would alert her if anyone opened it prematurely. Done, she said. The field covers the entire room. Once he's inside, he can't retransform. Ron walked to the center of the room. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Scabbers. The rat dangled from Ron's grip, nose twitching, whiskers quivering. Small, gray, unremarkable. Missing one toe on his front left paw. Ron looked at the rat. The rat looked at Ron. You know what, Ron said, in a conversational tone that was betrayed only by the slight tremor in his voice, I used to feel sorry for you. Thought you were just a mangy old rat who'd had a rough go. Tried to feed you extra. Let you sleep on my pillow. His jaw tightened. More fool me. He set the rat on the floor, inside the ward circle, and stepped back. Harry raised his wand. Homorphous. The spell hit Scabbers dead center. The rat squealed, a high, piercing sound that was already changing, deepening, warping into something that wasn't animal at all. The gray body contorted, stretched, grew. Fur receded. Limbs lengthened. The transformation was grotesque, not the smooth, elegant shift of a practiced animagus changing at will, but a forced reversion, like watching a crumpled piece of paper being unfolded by violence. In 3 seconds, the rat was gone. In its place stood a man. Peter Pettigrew was short, doughy, balding, and absolutely terrified. His eyes, small, watery, darting, swept the room with the frantic energy of a cornered animal. His clothes were the same ones he'd been wearing the night he'd faked his death, 12 years ago, now rotting and filthy. His left hand was missing its index finger, the stump long healed into a shiny knob of scar tissue. He looked at Harry. His face went white. No, Pettigrew whispered. No, 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 hello, Peter, Harry said. Pettigrew lunged for the door. The colloportus held. He scrabbled at the handle, whimpering, then spun and tried the other door, the one to the Great Hall. Hermione's alarm charm shrieked, and the door opened onto 100 startled faces. The Great Hall went silent. Every student, every professor, every ghost in the room turned to stare at the small, filthy man who'd just stumbled out of the antechamber, wild-eyed and gibbering. McGonagall rose from her seat at the high table, her hand already on her wand. What in the name of, Professor McGonagall, Harry said, stepping through the door behind Pettigrew, I'd like to introduce you to Peter Pettigrew. You may remember him as a student, Gryffindor, class of 1978. He's supposed to be dead. He's not. Pettigrew tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Dumbledore, who had risen from his chair with a speed that belied his age, flicked his wand. Invisible bonds wrapped around Pettigrew's body, locking his arms to his sides, freezing him mid-stride. He toppled like a felled tree and hit the stone floor with a meaty thud. The great hall erupted. Students were on their feet, shouting, craning to see. Professors rushed forward. Snape, Harry saw him from the corner of his eye, had gone absolutely rigid in his chair, his face a mask of shock so complete it had bypassed all his usual defenses. McGonagall reached Pettigrew first. She looked down at him with an expression that could have etched glass. "Peter Pettigrew," she said. "I taught you Transfiguration for 7 years. I would know your face anywhere." She looked at Dumbledore. "Albus, what is the meaning of this?" "I believe Mr. Potter can explain," Dumbledore said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were blazing. Harry explained. Quickly, clearly, standing in the center of the great hall with the entire school watching. He kept it simple. Pettigrew was an unregistered animagus who'd been hiding as a rat. He'd been the Potter's secret keeper, not Sirius Black. He'd betrayed them to Voldemort, then faked his death and framed Black for the murders. "That's a lie!" Pettigrew shrieked from the floor. His bonds kept him immobile, but his mouth worked furiously. "I didn't, Sirius was the traitor, Sirius killed those muggles, I'm the victim here." "Shut up, Peter," Ron said. His voice cut through the hall like a blade, and something about it, the raw, personal anger of a boy who'd slept next to this man for 2 years, silenced even the whispering students. "You've been living in my house. Eating my mum's cooking. Hiding in my family like a parasite. You don't get to play the victim." Pettigrew's eyes found Ron, and naked fear twisted his features. Then his gaze slid to Harry, and the fear deepened into something older, something primal. "You look like James," he whispered. "You look just like, don't." Harry's voice was quiet, but it carried. "Don't say his name. You don't get to say his name." Dumbledore stepped forward. "Minerva, please contact the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Inform them that we have a suspect in custody who is relevant to the case of Sirius Black. Emphasize that a full trial is required, for both Mr. Pettigrew and Mr. Black." "A trial?" McGonagall's nostrils flared. "Sirius Black never received a trial." "No. He did not." The temperature in the great hall seemed to drop by several degrees. McGonagall's expression could have frozen the lake solid. "I'll contact Amelia Bones directly," she said. "She's the only person at the ministry I'd trust with this." She strode out of the hall. Dumbledore levitated Pettigrew's bound body and followed, pausing at the door to address the stunned students. "Lunch will resume shortly. I ask that you remain calm and refrain from sending owls until the situation has been properly managed." "Thank you." The doors closed behind him. The hall exploded into noise. Harry stood in the center of the chaos, surrounded by shouting students and gaping professors, and felt the adrenaline begin to ebb. His hands were shaking. Hermione appeared at his side and took one of them, squeezing hard. "You did it," she said. Ron stood on his other side. His face was still pale, but the hardness was gone, replaced by something rawer and more complicated, relief, maybe, or the particular exhaustion that comes from carrying anger and finally setting it down. "So," Ron said. "Lunch?" Harry choked out a laugh. "Yeah. Lunch." They sat down at the Gryffindor table and ate, and around them the wizarding world began to shift on its axis. Events moved quickly after that. Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, a square-jawed witch with a monocle and a reputation for incorruptibility, arrived at Hogwarts within the hour. She interrogated Pettigrew under Veritaserum while Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Snape observed. Harry wasn't allowed in the room. He paced the corridor outside, wearing a groove in the stone floor, until Dumbledore emerged 2 hours later. He confessed, Dumbledore said. Everything. The betrayal, the murders, the animagus transformation. It's done. And Sirius? Amelia has already dispatched a team to Azkaban. Sirius Black will be released and transported to St. Mungo's Hospital for evaluation. Given the circumstances, formal exoneration should follow within days. Harry leaned against the corridor wall and closed his eyes. His godfather. A man he'd never met, not as Harry, only through Riddle's cold, clinical observations of the Order of the Phoenix, was about to be freed after 11 years of hell. Harry, Dumbledore said gently. Are you all right? Yeah. He opened his eyes. Yeah, I'm fine. Professor, Pettigrew, he can't escape. If he gets away, he will not escape. Amelia has him in magical restraints and is personally overseeing his transfer to a holding cell at the Ministry. The Veritaserum testimony will be entered into official record. Even Cornelius Fudge cannot ignore this. Fudge will try. Fudge will try, Dumbledore agreed. But Amelia Bones is not a woman who tolerates interference, and the evidence is incontrovertible. Public opinion will follow. Harry nodded. But something gnawed at him, a cold, persistent worry that he couldn't quite name. Pettigrew was captured. The confession was recorded. The plan had worked. So why did his scar itch? The answer came 3 days later. Harry was in the library, working on end-of-term potions revision that he didn't need but maintained for appearances, when an owl arrived. Not Hedwig, a ministry owl, brown and officious, bearing a sealed letter on cream parchment. He opened it. Dear Mr. Potter, I regret to inform you that during transfer from the ministry holding facility to a secure location, the prisoner Peter Pettigrew escaped custody. The circumstances are under investigation. We believe Pettigrew may have had assistance from unknown parties. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement assures you that every effort is being made to recapture the fugitive. Sirius Black's exoneration proceedings will continue regardless. Sincerely, Amelia Bones. Harry read the letter twice. Then he folded it very carefully, set it on the table, and pressed his fists against his eyes. Escaped. Pettigrew had escaped. Of course he had. Harry had known, in the part of his mind that ran on Riddle's ruthless calculus, that Pettigrew was the weakest link, the most desperate, the most likely to bolt. The ministry was bureaucratic, complacent, and riddled with sympathizers who'd never been properly purged after the last war. Someone had helped Pettigrew. Someone who wanted a way back to the Dark Lord. And Pettigrew, craven and terrified, would run to the only power that could protect him. The same way he'd run before. The same way he always ran. He would find Voldemort's wraith. And he would help it return. Harry's scar gave a vicious pulse. Behind his occlumency walls, the fragment stirred, restless, excited, sensing something shifting in the web of dark magic that connected the remaining pieces of Riddle's soul. The timeline had just accelerated. Harry found Dumbledore within the hour. Pettigrew will go to Voldemort, Harry said, without preamble. He'll find the wraith, Albania, probably, that's where it's been hiding, and he'll help Voldemort resurrect. There are rituals. Old magic, dark magic. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy. Pettigrew knows the ritual because Voldemort showed it to his inner circle as a contingency plan. Dumbledore's expression was grim. How long? Weeks. Maybe months, if Pettigrew has trouble finding the wraith. But he'll find it. He's got nowhere else to go. And when Voldemort returns, he'll be weaker than planned. He's missing most of his Horcruxes, he won't know that yet, but he'll feel it. The soul anchors stabilized his magic, and without them, his resurrected body will be diminished. Still dangerous. Still Voldemort. But not at full power. Can we prevent the resurrection? Not without finding Pettigrew first, and he could be anywhere by now. Harry ran a hand through his hair. We need to focus on what we can control. The cup. It's the last external Horcrux. If we destroy it before Voldemort returns, he'll come back with only 2 anchors, Nagini, if he makes her into one, and me. That's the weakest he can possibly be. Gringotts, Dumbledore said. Gringotts. The silence stretched. Fawkes trilled softly on his perch. Breaking into Gringotts, Dumbledore said, is widely considered to be impossible. It's considered impossible because nobody's ever had the specific knowledge required to bypass goblin security. I have that knowledge. Riddle studied Gringotts extensively. He placed the cup there himself, through Bellatrix Lestrange. I know the vault's defenses, the traps, the enchantments. I know about the thief's downfall, the dragon, the Gemino and Flagranti curses on the vault contents. I know the route from the surface to the deep vaults. Even so. The goblins are the key. Harry leaned forward. Professor, the goblins hate us. Not individually, systemically. Wizarding law has oppressed them for centuries. The wand ban. The property restrictions. The way Gringotts is treated as a service rather than a sovereign institution. Riddle understood this. He used it. And I can use it too, not the way he did, through manipulation, but through honest dealing. You want to negotiate with the goblins. I want to offer them something no wizard ever has, the truth. A Horcrux is an abomination in goblin culture as much as in wizarding culture. It violates the sanctity of creation, which is central to goblin magical philosophy. If I can convince the goblins that the cup in the Lestrange vault is a dark artifact that desecrates their bank, they might help us remove it. Not because they like us. Because their own principles demand it. Dumbledore studied him for a long time. Then, slowly, a smile crossed his face, not the twinkle, but something quieter, more genuine. You know, Dumbledore said, Tom Riddle would never have thought to ask the goblins for help. He would have manipulated, coerced, or stolen. It would never have occurred to him that honesty might be more effective than cunning. That's because Tom Riddle thought everyone was as selfish as he was. And you don't. I think most people, and most goblins, will do the right thing if you give them the chance. They just need to believe you're not playing them. A philosophy that will either save the world or get you killed. Probably both. Dumbledore laughed. Very well. Gringotts. When? This week. Before Pettigrew reaches Voldemort. The meeting with Griphook took place in a private chamber deep inside Gringotts, arranged through the bank's formal diplomatic channels. Harry had requested an audience with a senior vault manager, and Griphook, who remembered the unusual boy who'd cited the Gringotts Charter of 1743, had accepted. Dumbledore accompanied Harry but agreed to let Harry lead. This is your negotiation, the headmaster said. I am merely here as a guarantor of good faith. The chamber was circular, carved from dark stone, lit by crystal lamps. Griphook sat behind a desk of polished obsidian, flanked by 2 goblin guards in ceremonial armor. His expression was neutral in the way that only goblin expressions could be, revealing nothing, concealing everything. Mr. Potter, Griphook said. You requested this meeting under the protocols of cross-species diplomatic engagement. This is unusual for a human, and unprecedented for a child. I'm an unusual child, Harry said. So I'm beginning to understand. Griphook's dark eyes moved to Dumbledore, then back to Harry. Speak. Harry had rehearsed this. Not the manipulation, the truth. He'd decided, in the days since Pettigrew's escape, that the only way to make this work was to abandon Riddle's playbook entirely and do something the Dark Lord had never once contemplated, be completely, vulnerably honest with a goblin. There is an object in the Lestrange vault, Harry said. A golden cup. It belongs to the wizarding world. It was originally the property of Helga Hufflepuff, but it was placed in the vault by Bellatrix Lestrange on behalf of Lord Voldemort. Griphook's expression didn't change. But his fingers, resting on the desk, went very still. The cup has been corrupted, Harry continued. Voldemort performed a ritual on it, a ritual that split his soul and sealed a fragment inside the object. In wizarding terms, it's called a Horcrux. In goblin terms, I believe the closest concept is Grak-shun, the defilement of crafted works. The stillness in the room deepened. The two guards shifted. Griphook's eyes narrowed. You speak of Grak-shun, Griphook said. His voice was soft, which Harry knew from Riddle's experience meant the goblin was either very interested or very angry. No wizard has used that term in my hearing. How do you know it? I carry the memories of the wizard who committed the act. I know what he did to the cup. I know the ritual he used. And I know it violates everything the Goblin Nation holds sacred about the integrity of crafted objects. Griphook was silent for 10 long seconds. You are saying, the goblin said slowly, that a wizard placed a defiled object, a soul fragment, sealed in stolen goblin-worked gold, inside our bank. Inside our vaults. Without our knowledge or consent. Yes. And that this defilement has been sitting beneath our floors for over a decade. Yes. Griphook stood up. He was 3 feet tall and his fury could have filled the room. This is an act of war, he said. It's an insult, Harry agreed. And I want to help you remove it. What followed was 2 hours of the most intense negotiation Harry had ever experienced. Griphook was brilliant, sharp, suspicious, probing every angle for deception. Harry answered every question honestly, held nothing back, and made no demands. He asked for permission to enter the Lestrange vault, destroy the Horcrux, and leave everything else untouched. In return, he offered something that made Griphook's eyebrows climb toward his hairline, a formal written apology from the destroyers of the Horcrux to the Goblin Nation, acknowledging the desecration and affirming Goblin sovereignty over their vaults. An apology, Griphook repeated. Signed by me and Professor Dumbledore. Recognizing the violation. Respecting your jurisdiction. No wizard has ever apologized to a goblin for anything. Then it's long overdue. Griphook stared at him. The silence stretched until it hummed. You are either the most clever human I have ever met, Griphook said, or the most sincere. I cannot decide which is more dangerous. Can't I be both? Something extraordinary happened, Griphook smiled. Not the thin, razor smile of their first meeting, a real smile, showing pointed teeth. You may enter the Lestrange vault, Griphook said. Under escort. Tomorrow. The cup will be destroyed inside the vault, and the remains will be retained by Gringotts as evidence of the desecration. He paused. And I will hold you to that apology, Mr. Potter. I'd expect nothing less. They shook hands. Griphook's grip was iron. The Lestrange vault was a nightmare made of gold. Harry rode the minecart deep into the earth with Griphook, Dumbledore, and 2 goblin security officers. The air grew colder as they descended. The tracks twisted and plunged through caverns of raw rock, past underground rivers and columns of crystal. They passed through the Thief's Downfall, a waterfall of enchanted water that stripped all concealment charms, disguises, and magical enchantments from anyone who passed beneath it. Harry and Dumbledore emerged soaking wet, their borrowed Gringotts cloaks drenched, but otherwise unaffected. They had nothing to hide. The dragon guarding the deep vaults was enormous and pitiful, a Ukrainian iron belly, pale and half-blind, chained to the rock floor. It flinched when the goblins approached, conditioned by years of pain to fear the sound of their clanking armor. Harry looked at the dragon and felt sick. He filed it away, another wrong to right, another system to change, but not today. The vault door opened at Griphook's touch. Inside, mountains of gold and jewelry and dark artifacts filled a space the size of a cathedral. Everything gleamed. Everything was cursed, the Gemino charm would multiply any object touched, and the Flagranti curse would burn the skin off anyone who grabbed them. Don't touch anything, Griphook said. Wasn't planning on it. Harry drew his wand and cast the modified Point Me charm. The wand spun, steadied, and pointed toward the back of the vault, high up, on a shelf, nestled among a collection of golden goblets. There, Harry said. Griphook used goblin magic to levitate the cup down from the shelf, bypassing the vault's curses with the ease of a locksmith turning a key. The cup floated to the center of the vault floor, spinning slowly, and Harry could feel the Horcrux inside it, furious, panicking, sensing what was about to happen. He drew the last basilisk fong from his pouch. "This is the moment of truth," he said to Griphook. "The Horcrux will fight. It may produce illusions, sounds, magical backlash. Don't interfere. We will observe," Griphook said. "This is your Grakshun to cleanse." Harry knelt beside the cup. He raised the fong. The Horcrux screamed at him, not words, not this time, just raw psychic force, a blast of hatred and terror that made his vision white out and his scar burn like a fresh wound. He brought the fong down. The cup shrieked. A geyser of black smoke erupted from the puncture, filling the vault with darkness and cold. Harry heard voices, Riddle's voice, his mother's voice, his own voice, all tangled together in a howl of rage and loss. The vault shook. Gold coins cascaded from their piles. The goblin guards drew their weapons. Then it stopped. The smoke dissipated. The cup lay on the vault floor, cracked and ruined, the Horcrux gone. Harry knelt in the Lestrange vault, surrounded by cursed gold, and breathed. 5 destroyed. 1 remained. The one in his head. They emerged from Gringotts into blinding afternoon sunlight. Diagon Alley was busy, crowded with shoppers who had no idea that the most secure bank in the wizarding world had just hosted the destruction of a Dark Lord's soul fragment. Dumbledore squinted against the light and turned to Harry. The old man looked drained, the vault's ambient dark magic had been oppressive, even for him, but his eyes were bright. 5, Dumbledore said. 5. Harry, I must tell you, watching you negotiate with Griphook was one of the most remarkable things I have witnessed in a very long life. You treated him as an equal. You offered respect without condescension. Tom Riddle would have sooner cut off his own hand. Tom Riddle couldn't conceive of a world where goblins mattered. That's why he lost the first war. He couldn't imagine anyone fighting back. They walked in silence for a moment, threading through the Diagon Alley crowds. The last Horcrux, Dumbledore said quietly. I know. We need to discuss, not here. Not yet. Harry could feel his scar pulsing, a slow, steady rhythm that had grown stronger over the past week. The fragment was agitated. It could feel its siblings dying, one by one, and its isolation was making it louder, angrier, harder to contain. Soon, Harry said. But first, there's someone I need to meet. Sirius Black was released from Azkaban on a grey Thursday morning, 3 weeks after Pettigrew's confession was entered into the official record. The exoneration was formal, public, and accompanied by a compensation package from the ministry that Sirius reportedly told them to shove in a place that made the front page of the Daily Prophet. Harry met his godfather at 12, Grimmauld Place on a Saturday afternoon in June. Dumbledore had arranged it. The house was dark, grim, and permeated with the residual dark magic of the Black family, but it was private, and privacy was what Sirius needed. The man who opened the door was a ghost of the person Riddle's memories described. Sirius Black at 21 had been handsome, laughing, reckless, a man who dueled Death Eaters with a grin and rode a flying motorcycle and loved his friends with a ferocity that left no room for caution. Sirius Black at 33 was thin, hollow-eyed, and shaking. His hair was long and matted. His skin was grey. His eyes, dark, deep-set, had the distant, haunted quality of someone who'd spent a decade with Dementors and was still trying to remember what warmth felt like. But when he saw Harry, something lit up in those eyes. A spark, faint but real, like a match struck in a dark room. Harry, he said. His voice was rough, barely used. You look just like my dad. I know. But you've got my mum's eyes. Yeah. Harry smiled. I've heard. Sirius stared at him for a long, trembling moment. Then he did something Harry hadn't expected. He sat down on the hallway floor, put his face in his hands, and wept. Harry sat down beside him. He didn't say anything. He didn't try to comfort or console or fix. He just sat on the cold floor of Grimmauld Place, shoulder to shoulder with the man his parents had trusted most, and let him cry. After a long while, Sirius lifted his head. His eyes were red, his face wet, but the shaking had stopped. Dumbledore told me what you did, Sirius said. The rat. The confession. You're the reason I'm out. You're out because you were innocent. I just made sure someone noticed. Sirius laughed, a cracked, rusty sound, like machinery starting up after years of disuse. You sound like your mother. She always did have a talent for making the extraordinary sound obvious. Tell me about her, Harry said. Tell me about both of them. And Sirius did. They sat on the floor of 12, Grimmauld Place for 3 hours, and Sirius talked about James and Lily, their wedding, their laughter, the way James couldn't cook but insisted on trying, the way Lily sang off-key in the shower, the way they'd held Harry as a baby and looked at him like he was the most miraculous thing in the world. Harry listened to every word and stored it in a place that was entirely his own, not Riddle's memories, not borrowed knowledge, but something new and warm and precious. When he finally left, Sirius walked him to the door and gripped his shoulder. Whatever you're fighting, Sirius said, you're not fighting it alone. Not anymore. I know. I mean it, Harry. I lost 12 years. I'm not losing you too. Harry looked at his godfather, broken, healing, fierce, and felt the last wall inside him crack. You won't, he said. I promise. He walked out of Grimmauld Place and into the London evening. The sky was pale, the air warm. Somewhere to the east, in a forest in Albania or a forgotten ruin or a dark room that stank of snake and fear, Peter Pettigrew was finding what remained of Lord Voldemort and offering him a way back. The war was coming. Harry could feel it, in his scar, in his bones, in the cold arithmetic of Horcruxes destroyed and enemies gathering. Voldemort would return. Diminished, furious, missing most of his soul anchors, but alive. And when he did, he would come for Harry. Harry had one Horcrux left to destroy. The one he carried in his own head. The one that would require him to face the killing curse willingly, armed with nothing but his mother's protection and the theoretical possibility of survival. He was 12 years old. He was terrified. But he had friends who loved him, a godfather who'd fight for him, a headmaster who'd stand beside him, and the hard-won knowledge that Tom Riddle, for all his brilliance, all his power, all his terrible genius, had never understood the one thing that mattered most. You didn't conquer death by tearing your soul apart. You conquered death by building something worth dying for. Harry walked toward King's Cross Station, where a train would take him back to the world he'd been born into and the battle that was coming. His scar pulsed. The fragment stirred. The summer stretched ahead, hot and bright and uncertain. 5 Horcruxes destroyed. 1 to go. The hardest one. The last one. His. Chapter 6. The last Horcrux. Summer lay thick over London, the July heat turning the streets into shimmering rivers of light and exhaust. Harry sat in the kitchen of 12, Grimmauld Place, staring at a cup of tea he hadn't touched, and felt the war arrive. It came as pain. A sudden, blinding spike through his scar that dropped him forward against the table, knocking the teacup sideways, sending lukewarm Earl Grey flooding across a map of Albania that Dumbledore had left spread out the night before. Harry caught himself on his elbows and breathed through it, short, sharp breaths, the way he'd taught himself years ago in the cupboard under the stairs, while behind his occlumency walls, the fragment in his skull thrashed and screamed. Not in anger. In joy. Voldemort was back. Harry could feel it, the dark thread connecting his scar to the source, suddenly blazing with power, a severed nerve reattached to a living body. Somewhere, In some dark and hidden place, Peter Pettigrew had completed the ritual. Bone of the father. Flesh of the servant. Blood of the enemy, though whose blood Pettigrew had used, Harry didn't know. In the original plan, it was supposed to be Harry's. Without Harry, Pettigrew would have improvised. An enemy's blood. Any enemy's blood. It wouldn't matter. The ritual worked on symbolic resonance, not precision. Voldemort had a body again. Harry pressed his forehead against the cool surface of the table and waited for the pain to subside. It took 3 minutes. When he lifted his head, Sirius was standing in the kitchen doorway, wand drawn, face taut. "Your scar," Sirius said. "He's back." Harry wiped tea off the map with his sleeve. "Voldemort. He's resurrected. I felt it." Sirius didn't flinch at the name. He was one of the few people who'd never flinched at it, even before Azkaban. "When?" "Just now. Minutes ago." "Where?" "I don't know exactly. Not Albania, he'll have moved. Somewhere in England, probably. The ritual requires the father's bones, and Tom Riddle Sr. is buried in Little Hangleton." Harry's mind was already running, sorting data, mapping possibilities. Riddle's memories provided the ritual's requirements, and from the requirements, he could extrapolate the location. The graveyard. He did it in the graveyard, next to his father's grave. That's where the bones are. Then we go. Sirius crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, snatching his jacket off the back of a chair. "Right now. Before he's had time to, no." The word stopped Sirius mid-stride. He turned, and Harry saw the wildness in his godfather's eyes, the reckless, incandescent bravery that had made Sirius Black both magnificent and impossible. 12 years in Azkaban had stolen many things from him, but not this. Never this. "Harry, we don't go charging at Voldemort in a graveyard without a plan. That's how people die. That's how you die, and I didn't spend 6 months clearing your name just to get you killed in a cemetery." Sirius opened his mouth. Closed it. The wildness banked, forced down by an effort of will that Harry could see cost him dearly. "Fine," Sirius said. "Then what's the plan?" "We contact Dumbledore. We gather the order. And we prepare for what's coming, because it's coming fast." Harry sent Hedwig with a message that said 3 words, "He is back." Then he sent a Patronus, a stag, silver and bright, his father's form, streaking through the walls of Grimmauld Place toward Hogwarts. Dumbledore would understand. While he waited, Harry sat at the kitchen table and took stock. 5 Horcruxes destroyed. The diadem, the diary, the locket, the ring, the cup. Gone. Every external anchor obliterated. Which meant Voldemort had returned to a body sustained by only 2 soul fragments, whatever remained of his primary soul, and the piece embedded in Harry's scar. He was diminished. Harry could feel it through the connection, a thinness to Voldemort's magical presence, like a fire burning on its last fuel. The Dark Lord would be powerful, still far beyond most wizards, but he was no longer the nearly invulnerable force he'd been during the First War. His magic would fatigue faster. His body would be fragile. And he wouldn't understand why. Not yet. He'd discover the truth about his Horcruxes eventually, he'd check on them, or try to, and find them missing or destroyed. When that happened, his reaction would be volcanic. A Voldemort who knew his immortality was gone was a Voldemort with nothing to lose, and there was nothing more dangerous than that. Harry needed to end this before that discovery happened. Days. He had days, maybe a week, before Voldemort checked his anchors. Dumbledore arrived at Grimmauld Place within the hour, looking as though he'd dressed in the dark and operatte while still buttoning his robes. His face was grave, his eyes sharp, all pretense of twinkling grandfatherliness stripped away. "You're certain?" he said, before he was fully through the door. "The scar doesn't lie. He's back. And he's in Little Hangleton." Not for long, I suspect. He'll move quickly, gather followers, establish a base, begin rebuilding. Dumbledore sat down at the table, and for a moment, in the harsh kitchen light, he looked every one of his 150 years. The order is being recalled. Minerva, Alastair, Kingsley, the Weasleys, everyone. How long to assemble? Hours. By tonight, we'll have a core group. By tomorrow, we'll have the full network. That might not be fast enough. Dumbledore studied him. You're thinking about the last Horcrux. Harry didn't answer immediately. He got up, crossed to the stove, and put the kettle on. A mundane action, deliberate and grounding. The kettle filled. The gas lit. Blue flame. He'll figure out the Horcruxes are gone, Harry said, watching the kettle. Maybe not today. Maybe not this week. But soon. And when he does, he'll come for me. Not just because of the prophecy. Because he'll realize I'm the last anchor. The last piece of his soul outside his own body. He'll want to protect me, or, more likely, he'll want to control me. Possess me. Use the fragment as a doorway. Can he do that? Riddle's research suggests it's possible. The connection between us is stronger now, I can feel him, and he can feel me. If he pushes hard enough, through the scar, he could theoretically enter my mind. My occlumency would hold against ordinary legilimency, but this isn't ordinary. This is a soul fragment recognizing its source. It wants to go home. The kettle whistled. Harry poured 2 cups of tea. He set one in front of Dumbledore and kept the other, wrapping both hands around it as if the warmth could push back the cold that had settled in his chest. I need to do it soon, Harry said. The last Horcrux. Before he comes looking. Harry, I know what you're going to say. I doubt that, because what I'm going to say is, I will not allow you to walk to your death without every possible safeguard in place. Dumbledore's voice was iron beneath silk. We discussed this. The theory, your mother's protection, the sacrificial magic, the possibility that the killing curse would destroy the fragment without destroying you. It is a possibility, Harry. Not a certainty. I know. And you're prepared to stake your life on a possibility. I'm prepared to stake my life on the fact that 5 Horcruxes are already gone, and if I don't take care of the 6th, everything we've done is meaningless. Voldemort can't be killed while the fragment in my scar survives. That's not a theory. That's a fact. Silence. The tea steamed. Somewhere above them, Sirius paced. Harry could hear the footsteps, restless and caged. There's another option, Dumbledore said quietly. One I've been researching since you first told me about the scar. Harry looked at him. The killing curse is not the only force capable of destroying a Horcrux, Dumbledore continued. It is the most certain, yes. But the Horcrux in your scar is different from the others. It was not created intentionally. It was not anchored by ritual or vessel. It is parasitic, attached to your soul but not fused with it. And parasites, Harry, can sometimes be removed without killing the host. How? Love. Harry blinked. I am not being sentimental, Dumbledore said. I am being precise. The sacrificial protection your mother placed on you is not merely a shield. It is a living enchantment, woven into your blood, sustained by the act of love that created it. It is, in the most literal magical sense, the antithesis of a Horcrux. A Horcrux is created through murder, the ultimate act of severing human connection. Your mother's protection was created through sacrifice, the ultimate act of sustaining it. You're saying the protection could destroy the fragment? I'm saying the protection has been fighting the fragment since the night it was placed in you. For 12 years, it has contained it, limited it, prevented it from consuming you. What I am proposing is that we give it the opportunity to finish, not through the violence of a killing curse, but through a deliberate, focused act of the same magic that created it. Harry set his tea down. How, specifically? The resurrection stone. Harry's hand went to his pocket. The cracked black stone was there, he'd carried it since the gaunt shack, unsure why, acting on instinct. He drew it out and set it on the table between them. The stone calls the dead, Dumbledore said. Not truly, it produces shades, echoes, impressions of those who've passed beyond. But your mother is not merely dead. Her magic is alive, in you, in the protection she created. If the stone can strengthen that connection, amplify the echo of her sacrifice, it may be possible to turn the protection inward. To direct it at the fragment. To burn it out of you the way sunlight burns shadow. May be possible, Harry repeated. I will not lie to you. The risk is enormous. The fragment will fight. Your scar will try to tear itself open. You will experience pain beyond anything I can prepare you for. And there is a chance, a real chance, that the process will kill you. A smaller chance than the killing curse. Dumbledore hesitated. I believe so. But I cannot be certain. Harry picked up the resurrection stone. It was cold in his hand, cracked down the center, the Peveril symbol barely visible. He turned it over, feeling its weight. I want to talk to her, he said. Before we try. I want to talk to my mom. Something broke in Dumbledore's expression. Not visibly, the old man's composure held, but Harry could feel it, the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Of course, Dumbledore said. They chose that night. Harry sent messages to the people who mattered. Hermione and Ron first, a Patronus each, carrying the same words, come to Grimmauld Place. Tonight. I need you. They arrived within the hour, Hermione through the floor with soot on her jumper and fear in her eyes, Ron through the front door because he'd been at the Burrow and had flown to London on a broomstick so fast he'd broken some kind of Weasley family speed record. Harry told them what was happening. All of it. The resurrection, the timeline, the last Horcrux, the plan. Ron went white. Hermione went still. No, Hermione said. Hermione, no. Absolutely not. You are not, Harry, you cannot just decide to, her voice fractured. She pressed her fist against her mouth and breathed hard through her nose, the way she did when she was trying not to cry and refusing to let her emotions override her logic. There has to be another way. A safer way. I'll research. Give me a week, give me 2 days, I'll find. We don't have 2 days. Voldemort is back. Every hour we wait, he gets stronger and we get closer to him discovering the Horcruxes are gone. Then let Dumbledore do it. Let someone else, nobody else can do it. It's my scar. My fragment. My mother's protection. Ron hadn't spoken. He stood by the kitchen door, arms at his sides, face pale beneath his freckles. He was looking at Harry with an expression that Harry had never seen on him before, not fear, not anger, but a kind of anguished resolve, the look of someone who understood what was happening and hated it and was choosing to stand firm anyway. What do you need from us? Ron said. Hermione spun toward him. Ron, you can't just, what do you need? Ron repeated, his eyes on Harry. Harry's throat ached. I need you to be there. Both of you. When it happens. I need, he stopped. The next words were harder than any spell he'd ever cast, harder than Parseltongue, harder than the Fong driving through a screaming Horcrux. I need to know that if it goes wrong, the people I love are the last thing I see. Hermione made a sound. Not a word, a raw, hurt noise that came from somewhere deeper than language. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and threw her arms around him, holding on with a fierceness that drove the air from his lungs. You're not going to die, she said into his shoulder. You are not going to die. I'll try my best. You'd better do more than try. She pulled back, eyes red, jaw set. What time? Midnight. Ron walked over and put his hand on Harry's shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His hand was warm and steady and said everything that mattered. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Whatever happens. Harry covered Ron's hand with his own, and for a moment, the three of them stood in the kitchen of Grimmauld Place, and the war and the Horcruxes and the Dark Lord's resurrection faded to background noise, and there was only this, three children who'd found each other in a castle and built something that Tom Riddle had spent a lifetime failing to understand. They prepared the room. Dumbledore chose the drawing room on the first floor, spacious, warded, and far enough from the street that no magical disturbance would be detectable from outside. He spent 3 hours laying protections, containment wards, medical enchantments, fail-safes designed to stabilize Harry's body if his heart stopped or his magic collapsed. Sirius helped, working in grim, focused silence, his wand moving in precise arcs that belied the tremor in his hands. Snape arrived at 10. Harry had asked Dumbledore to summon him, and the old man had obliged without question. Snape swept into Grimmauld Place with his usual dramatic economy of movement and stopped dead in the drawing-room doorway when he saw the ward configurations. "What," Snape said, in a voice that could have frozen fire, "is happening here?" "Severus," Dumbledore said calmly. "Thank you for coming. You said it was urgent. You did not say it was insane." Snape's black eyes swept the room, the wards, the runes on the floor, the basilisk fong laid out on a cloth beside the resurrection stone. His gaze landed on Harry, and something flickered in his expression. "Potter. Explain." Harry explained. Concisely, without emotion, in the clinical terms that Snape would respect. The fragment. The sole piece in his scar. The need to remove it. The plan. Snape listened without moving. When Harry finished, the potion's master was silent for a long count of 10. "You want to use a deathly hallow and sacrificial love magic to exorcise a Horcrux from a living host," Snape said. "A procedure that has never been attempted in recorded magical history." "That's correct. And your contingency if it fails?" "Professor Dumbledore's medical wards." "Your expertise in counter curses." "And," Harry paused. "If the fragment can't be removed safely, I've asked Professor Dumbledore to use the killing curse." The silence that followed was absolute. Snape's face went through a transformation that Harry had never seen. The mask cracked. Not much, a fissure, not a collapse, but enough to reveal what lay beneath, raw, visceral, agonizing emotion that the man had spent 2 decades burying under layers of bitterness and cruelty and cold precision. "Lily's son," Snape said. The words were barely audible. Asking to be killed to destroy the Dark Lord. Asking to be saved, if possible. Accepting the alternative if not. Snape's jaw clenched. A muscle leaped in his cheek. He turned away from Harry and faced the wall, and for 30 seconds, the most controlled man in the room fought a war with himself that was visible only in the rigid line of his shoulders and the white-knuckled grip on his wand. When he turned back, the mask was in place. But his eyes were different. Something in them had shifted, not softened, exactly, but clarified. As if a lens had been adjusted and the picture had finally come into focus. "I will be present," Snape said. "I will manage the counter curses. And if this fails, Potter, I want you to know that your mother would have been," he stopped. Swallowed. "She would have been proud." It was, Harry suspected, the hardest thing Severus Snape had ever said. "Thank you, Professor." Snape nodded once, sharply, and turned to Dumbledore. "Show me the ward configurations. If we're going to do something this reckless, we're going to do it properly." Midnight. The drawing room was lit by a single circle of candles, white, unscented, burning with steady flames that didn't flicker despite the draft from the old windows. Harry sat in the center of the circle, cross-legged on the bare floor, the resurrection stone in his right hand. Dumbledore stood at the edge of the circle, wand raised, maintaining the containment wards. Snape stood opposite, his own wand ready, a battery of potions arranged on a side table, blood replenishing, nerve stabilizing, a bezoar, and 3 vials of something Harry didn't recognize but suspected was designed to restart a stopped heart. Sirius stood by the door. His face was carved from stone. He'd argued against this, loudly, furiously, with a passion that had rattled the windowpanes, and then he'd stopped arguing and taken his position, because that was what you did when someone you loved made a choice you couldn't change. You stood by the door and you waited and you prayed to whatever you believed in. Ron and Hermione sat against the far wall, shoulder to shoulder. Hermione held Ron's hand. Ron held hers back. Neither of them looked away from Harry. "When you're ready," Dumbledore said. Harry looked at the stone. Small, cracked, unremarkable. The symbol of the Hallows was a hairline fracture on its surface. He thought about what Dumbledore had said, about the stone calling echoes of the dead, about his mother's magic being alive in him, about love as a force that could burn shadow out of bone. He thought about his mother standing in front of a crib. He turned the stone 3 times. The air changed. The candle flames lengthened, turned silver, and the temperature plunged. Harry's breath misted. The fragment in his scar stirred, uneasy, sensing something it didn't understand. Then she was there. Lily Potter stood before him, made of moonlight and memory. Not solid, translucent, shimmering, a shape woven from magic and love and the indelible imprint of a soul that refused to be entirely gone. Her red hair drifted as if in a breeze Harry couldn't feel. Her eyes, green, bright, his eyes, looked at him with an expression that contained entire worlds. "Harry," she said. He'd heard her voice before. In Riddle's memories, screaming, begging. But this was different. This was soft. This was hers. "Mum," he said, and his voice broke on the word like a wave on rocks. She smiled. It was the saddest, most beautiful smile Harry had ever seen. "Oh, my brave boy. Look at you." She reached toward him, her hand didn't quite make contact, hovering an inch from his cheek, but he could feel her warmth. Real warmth, not memory, not magic. The warmth of the protection she'd left in his skin the night she died. "I've been with you. Every moment. I've been right here. I know." Tears ran down his face. He let them. "I could feel you. When the Horcruxes fought, when they screamed, there was always something underneath. Something warm. That was you. That was me." A second figure materialized beside her. Taller, wilder, with messy black hair and glasses and a grin that Harry recognized from photographs but had never seen in person. James Potter. His father. "You've got nerve, kid," James said. His voice was exactly how Sirius described it, warm, amused, slightly reckless. 12 years old and you've been running circles around Voldemort. Your mother's brains and my sheer audacity." "James," Lily said, in a tone of fond exasperation that was so domestic, so normal, that it hurt more than anything. "What? I'm proud. Let me be proud." Harry laughed through his tears. "I need your help," he said. "Both of you. There's a piece of him, of Voldemort, in my scar. In my head. It's been there since the night you died. And I need it gone." Lily's expression shifted. The warmth remained, but beneath it, Harry saw steel, the same steel that had faced the Dark Lord in a nursery and refused to step aside. "I know what you carry," she said. "I've known since the moment it happened. My protection has been holding it back, keeping it from consuming you. But I couldn't destroy it on my own. I needed you to be ready. I needed you to choose this. I'm ready. It will hurt. I know. It will hurt more than anything you've ever felt. I've felt a lot." Lily's hand came closer. This time, it touched his cheek. The contact was electric, a surge of magic so powerful that the candle flames flared to twice their height and the ward circle blazed white. Harry felt the protection roar to life inside him, not the passive shield he'd carried all his life, but something active, directed, purposeful. A force that had been waiting 12 years for this moment. The fragment in his scar screamed. Not the muffled protest of a contained parasite. A full, unbridled, psychic shriek that erupted from Harry's forehead and filled the room with black smoke and green light. Harry's scar ripped open, blood poured down his face, warm and fast, and the fragment fought. It fought with everything it had, every ounce of Tom Riddle's desperate, death-fearing will, clawing at the inside of Harry's skull, trying to bury itself deeper, trying to fuse permanently with Harry's soul so that destroying it would mean destroying him. Harry screamed. He couldn't help it. The pain was beyond anything, beyond the cave, beyond the diary's death, beyond every moment of agony Riddle's memories had ever inflicted. This was the pain of something being torn out of him by the roots, something that had been part of him for so long that removing it felt like removing bone. Hold on. Lily's voice cut through the agony like a blade of light. Harry, hold on. Let me in. He let go. Not of consciousness, of control. He dropped his occlumency walls, every one of them, for the first time since he'd built them. The barriers that kept Riddle's memories contained, the shields that hid his secrets, the careful architecture of defense he'd spent years constructing, all of it came down in a single, deliberate act of trust. His mother's magic flooded in. It was warmth. It was light. It was the feeling of being held as an infant, of being loved without condition or reservation, of being wanted so completely that the universe itself had bent to accommodate it. The protection poured through Harry's undefended mind like sunrise through an open window, and everywhere it touched, the darkness burned. The fragment howled. Harry could see it now, not with his eyes, but with some deeper sense. A black, twisted thing, lodged in the scar tissue of his forehead, wrapped around his neural pathways like a vine strangling a tree. It was ugly. It was afraid. And as his mother's magic reached it, as the golden light touched the dark, it began to dissolve. Not quickly. Not easily. It fought for every second of its existence, throwing out tendrils of dark magic, trying to pull Harry down with it. Harry felt himself being dragged, toward darkness, toward death, toward the cold void where Tom Riddle's soul fragments went when they died. Let go, a voice whispered. Riddle's voice. Let go, and the pain stops. Let go, and we go together. You and I. We've always been the same. No, Harry thought. And the word was quiet and steady and absolute. We were never the same. You chose fear. I choose love. And love wins. The golden light blazed. The fragment shrieked one final, terrible time, a sound that shattered every window in the drawing room, that cracked the candles, that sent Sirius to his knees and made Snape stagger, and then it was gone. Harry collapsed. Darkness. Silence. Floating. He was in a white space. Not a room, a space. Infinite, featureless, warm. The pain was gone. Everything was gone. He drifted, formless, weightless, and for a moment, a long, suspended moment, he thought, this is death. I'm dead. Not quite, said a voice. Harry turned. His mother stood beside him, not the shade from the resurrection stone, but something more solid, more real. She was smiling. You're between, she said. The fragment is gone. Your body is healing. You need to go back. What if I don't want to? You do. You have friends waiting. A godfather who needs you. A world that needs fixing. The world's always going to need fixing. Yes. That's rather the point of being alive. She touched his face, really touched it, warm and solid. Go back, Harry. Finish this. And when it's truly over, when you've lived a long, full, wonderful life, I'll be here. Promise? Always. The white space dissolved. Reality crashed back, pain, noise, light, the smell of blood and burned magic, and Harry gasped, his eyes flying open, his back arching off the floor. He was in the drawing room. The candles were out. The windows were shattered. Snape was kneeling over him, pouring something down his throat that tasted like liquid fire and burned all the way to his stomach. Dumbledore was maintaining the wards, his face grey with effort. Sirius was on Harry's other side, gripping his hand hard enough to grind the bones together. And Ron and Hermione were there, right there, their faces tear-streaked and terrified and blazing with relief. "He's back," Hermione sobbed. "He's breathing, he's back." Harry lay on the floor and felt the absence. The fragment was gone. The thing that had lived in his scar since infancy, the dark passenger, the borrowed memories, the cold whisper in the back of his mind, was gone. His head was quiet. Truly quiet, for the first time in his entire life. He touched his scar. It was smooth. Just skin. No pulse, no heat, no dark heartbeat. He was just Harry. "It worked," he said. His voice was a rasp. "It's gone." Sirius made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob and was entirely the sound of a man who'd spent the last 40 minutes believing his godson was dying. "Don't you ever," Sirius said, "do that again. Deal?" Harry sat up. Snape tried to push him back down. Harry gave the potion's master a look that, for once, carried no borrowed cunning, no Riddle-inspired calculation, just pure, stubborn Gryffindor will. "I'm fine," Harry said. "And we're not done." Voldemort came to Hogwarts 3 days later. Harry had known he would. With the Horcruxes destroyed, Voldemort would have felt the last one die, the fragment in Harry's scar, severed from the network, extinguished. He would have checked the others and found them gone. And he would have understood, finally, that he was mortal. A mortal Voldemort was a desperate Voldemort. And a desperate Voldemort did the only thing he knew how to do, attack. He came at dawn, with what remained of his followers. Not the full army of the First War, there hadn't been time to rebuild. But enough. 30, maybe 40 Death Eaters, freed from Azkaban or pulled from hiding, led by a Dark Lord whose power was diminished but whose fury was boundless. They hit the Hogwarts wards like a battering ram. Harry felt it from inside the castle, a shudder that ran through the stone, a deep vibration that set the suits of armor rattling and the portraits crying out in alarm. Dumbledore had prepared. The Order of the Phoenix was assembled. The professors were armed. The older students who'd volunteered, and there were more than Harry expected, far more, stood at the windows and the doors, wands drawn, faces set. McGonagall commanded the East Wing. Flitwick took the West. Snape anchored the dungeons. Sirius and Kingsley Shacklebolt held the main entrance. And Dumbledore stood at the top of the grand staircase, the Elder Wand in his hand, looking not like a headmaster but like the wizard who had defeated Grindelwald, ancient, terrible, and magnificent. Harry stood beside him. "You should be somewhere safe," Dumbledore said. "There isn't anywhere safe. And he'll come for me specifically. You know that." "Yes. I know that." Dumbledore looked at him with those blue eyes, no twinkle now, just clarity. "Stay close. When the moment comes, let me engage him first. He doesn't know the Horcruxes are gone. He doesn't know the fragment has been removed. Those are our advantages. He'll figure it out fast. Then we must be faster." The wards broke at 6:17 in the morning. A sound like shattering glass, amplified to the scale of a thunderclap, rolled across the grounds. The Death Eaters poured through the gap, masked, robed, firing curses that lit the dawn sky in red and green. The Battle of Hogwarts lasted 4 hours. Harry didn't see most of it. He saw fragments, snapshots, moments of violence and heroism that burned themselves into his memory with the permanence of scars. He saw Neville Longbottom, round-faced, clumsy Neville, charged 3 Death Eaters with nothing but a stunning spell and a look of such ferocious determination that 2 of them actually flinched. He saw Fred and George Weasley fighting back-to-back, laughing, turning the West Corridor into a gauntlet of explosive pranks repurposed as weapons. He saw Hermione dueling Dolohov with the cold precision of a surgeon, deflecting curses that should have overwhelmed her through sheer speed of thought. He saw Ron take a curse meant for his sister and go down hard, and Harry's heart stopped until he saw Ron roll over, bleeding but alive, and get back up. He saw Snape. The potion's master fought like something out of a nightmare, silent, efficient, devastating. Death Eaters fell before him, and Harry saw the moment Voldemort's followers realized that Severus Snape had never truly been one of them. The betrayal on their faces was almost satisfying. And he saw Sirius, standing in the entrance hall, wand blazing, holding the line against 5 Death Eaters at once, and laughing, that wild, reckless, defiant laugh that had survived 12 years of Dementors, and Harry thought, this is what it looks like when someone is fighting for something instead of against it. Voldemort came for Harry at 10 in the morning. The Dark Lord walked through the front doors of Hogwarts like he owned the castle. The battle had thinned around the entrance hall, most of the fighting had moved to the upper floors and the grounds, and when Voldemort appeared, the combatants on both sides froze. He was horrible. The resurrection ritual had given him a body, but not a human one, tall, skeletal, white as bone, with red eyes set in a flat, noseless face. His robes were black, his wand was raised, and the magic rolling off him was a physical force, a pressure wave that made the torches gutter and the stones groan. But Harry could see what no one else could. The thinness. The fraying at the edges. Voldemort's magical aura, which should have been an inferno, was a flickering flame. The destroyed Horcruxes had taken their toll. He was running on fumes. Harry Potter, Voldemort said. His voice echoed through the entrance hall, high and cold. You have been busy. You have no idea, Harry said. They faced each other across 20 feet of stone floor. The boy who lived and the Dark Lord. 12 years old and 100 and something, depending on how you counted the years as a wraith. My Horcruxes, Voldemort said. The word was laced with poison. You destroyed them. All of them. All of them. Even the one in your scar. Harry touched his forehead. Smooth skin. Nothing more. Even that one. Something happened to Voldemort's face. The mask of cold control cracked, and what showed through was not anger but terror. Pure, primal, existential terror, the fear of death, the fear that had driven every choice Tom Riddle had ever made, from the orphanage to the Horcruxes to this moment, standing in a castle with a borrowed wand and a body held together by willpower and dark magic. You cannot kill me, Voldemort said, but the words had lost their certainty. I am Lord Voldemort. I have conquered death, you never conquered death. You just ran from it. And you ran so far and so fast that you forgot what living looked like. Harry's wand was in his hand, Holly, Phoenix Feather, brother to Voldemort's own. It's over, Tom. Do not call me that, it's your name. The name your mother gave you. The name of the boy who was afraid to die and broke his own soul trying to avoid it. You could have been anything, Tom. You had the talent, the intelligence, the power. And you threw it all away because you couldn't do the one thing that actually matters. And what is that? Voldemort snarled. Love someone more than you fear losing them. Voldemort raised his wand. Harry raised his. Avada Kedavra. Expelliarmus. The spells met in midair. The twin cores connected, Phoenix Feather to Phoenix Feather, brother to brother, and the air between them split open. Golden light erupted from the connection point, a blazing thread that linked their wands in a bridge of pure magic. The priori incantatem effect, amplified by the brother cores, fed by the collision of the darkest curse and the simplest defensive charm. But this time, something was different. Voldemort's curse was weaker. His soul, reduced to a single fragment, the original, damaged, diminished piece that was all that remained, couldn't sustain the killing curse at full power. The green jet flickered. Wavered. The golden thread pushed it back, inch by inch, the light of Harry's Expelliarmus overwhelming the darkness of Voldemort's Avada Kedavra. Voldemort's eyes went wide. For the first time in his existence, Tom Riddle looked his age, not the ageless, deathless Dark Lord, but a very old, very tired, very frightened man who was watching his last weapon fail. "No," he whispered. The golden light reached Voldemort's wand. The U-wood cracked. The phoenix feather core screamed, a high, musical note that was Fawkes's voice, singing across the connection, singing for both cores, singing a lament for the wizard who had taken a tool of creation and used it only to destroy. Voldemort's wand shattered. The killing curse rebounded. Green light struck Voldemort in the chest, and Lord Voldemort, Tom Marvolo Riddle, half-blood, orphan, murderer, the most feared dark wizard in a century, fell. He hit the stone floor with a sound that was terribly, mundanely human. No explosion. No dramatic dissolution. Just a body, collapsing, empty, finished. The red eyes dulled. The white face slackened. And the Dark Lord was dead. Truly dead. No Horcruxes to catch him. No anchors to hold his soul. Just death, simple and complete, the thing he'd feared more than anything in the world, arriving at last with all the ceremony of a closing door. Harry stood in the entrance hall of Hogwarts, his wand smoking, his scar silent, and looked at the body of the man whose memories he'd carried for 12 years. He felt nothing. And then he felt everything. And then he sat down on the floor, very carefully, and put his face in his hands, and wept. Ron reached him first. Then Hermione. Then Sirius, and Dumbledore, and Neville, and a dozen others, crowding around, voices overlapping, hands on his shoulders, and Harry cried until he had nothing left, and then he stopped, and he looked up at the people who loved him, and he smiled. "It's done," he said. The sun came up over Hogwarts. The battle was over. The dead were mourned and the living were held, and the castle, damaged but standing, began the long process of putting itself back together. Harry stood on the astronomy tower at noon, looking out over the grounds. The lake glittered. The forest rustled. Below, in the courtyard, witches and wizards moved among the debris, repairing walls, tending wounds, embracing each other with the stunned, grateful disbelief of survivors. Hermione and Ron stood beside him. Hermione had a bandage on her arm. Ron had a black eye. They were alive. "So," Ron said, after a long silence. "What now?" Harry thought about it. For the first time in his life, the question had no urgent answer. No Horcruxes to hunt. No Dark Lord to destroy. No mission, no plan, no cold arithmetic of sacrifice and necessity. Just a boy. 12 years old. Standing on a tower with his friends. "I heard there's a Quidditch match next week," Harry said. "Gryffindor versus Hufflepuff. Haven't practiced in months." Ron grinned. "Mate, you haven't practiced ever. You just get on the broom and wing it. It's worked so far. It's an absolute miracle, is what it is." Hermione shook her head. "You two are impossible." "You love us," Ron said. "Unfortunately." But she was smiling. Harry leaned against the tower railing and let the wind catch his hair. His scar was quiet. His mind was his own. The memories were still there, Riddle's life, etched into his brain, a library of darkness that would never fully fade. But they were quieter now. Less insistent. Filed away in the deep archives of his mind, accessible but no longer controlling. He was Harry Potter. Just Harry. A boy with his mother's eyes and his father's hair and a scar that was just a scar. The sun was warm on his face. Somewhere below, Hagrid was sweeping the courtyard, singing off-key. Somewhere inside the castle, Dumbledore was meeting with the Ministry, beginning the long work of rebuilding. Somewhere in London, Sirius was adopting a dog, an actual dog, not himself, because he'd decided that Grimmauld Place was too quiet for one person. The world was broken and beautiful and full of work to do, and Harry was alive to do it. "Come on," he said. "Let's go get lunch. I'm starving." They walked down from the tower together, the boy who remembered everything, the girl who understood everything, and the boy who stayed through everything, and the castle received them the way it always had, the way it always would, with open doors and warm light and the promise that this was home, and home endured, and the people inside it were worth every impossible thing he'd done to protect them. The war was over. The boy lived. And the story, at last, was his own.